The Montana Territory stretched out harsh and unforgiving in the summer of 1883, a land where weakness meant death and survival meant sacrifice. The Hale homestead sat at the edge of civilization, a weathered collection of buildings that leaned like tired old men against the constant wind. Paint peeled from warped boards, fences sagged under the weight of too many seasons. And inside the cramped main house, desperation had become as familiar as the smell of wood smoke and unwashed clothes. Clara Hale knew every crack in those walls, every stain on the floorboards, every place where the roof leaked when it rained. At 22, she'd spent half her life trying to hold this place together with nothing but willpower and work. Her hands bore the evidence, calluses thick as leather, scars from barbed wire and broken tools, fingers that ached in the cold. She was tall for a woman, raw-boned and strong, with dark hair she kept tied back in a practical braid and eyes the color of storm clouds. Nobody called her pretty. That word belonged to her younger sister. "Clara, the water!" Her stepmother Margaret's voice cut through the morning air, sharp with perpetual irritation. "Those chickens won't feed themselves, and your father needs his coffee before the men arrive." Clara was already moving, had been moving since before dawn. She'd milked the cow, gathered eggs, split kindling, and hauled water from the creek twice already. But there was always more. There was always more. She grabbed the wooden buckets and headed outside, her worn boots kicking up dust in the yard. The sun was barely above the horizon, but heat already shimmered off the hard-packed earth. Drought had held the territory in its grip for 3 years now, turning the land mean and the people meaner. Their creek ran low, barely a trickle. The vegetable garden was dying despite Clara's efforts, and the cattle, what few head they had left, grew thinner by the week. Her father had made bad choices. Everyone knew it, gambled when he should have saved, drank when he should have worked, let the ranch fall apart around him while he chased dreams of easy money that never materialized. Now they were 3 months behind on the bank loan, and the vultures were circling, which was why today mattered so much. Clara hauled the water back to the house, her shoulders burning. Through the window, she could see her sister Catherine sitting at the vanity, Margaret fussing over her hair. Catherine was 19, soft and blonde and lovely, with the kind of delicate beauty that made men stumble over their words. She'd never worked a hard day in her life, never had to, because Catherine was the plan. "Higher, Mama," Catherine was saying, examining her reflection with critical eyes. "The curls need to frame my face better. What if he doesn't like them?" "He'll adore you, darling." Margaret worked another ribbon into Catherine's elaborate hairstyle. "What man could resist? You're perfect. Simply perfect." Clara set the buckets down harder than necessary. Water sloshed onto the floor. "Careful," Margaret snapped. "Do you want to ruin everything? This floor needs to look presentable." "Then maybe you should mop it yourself," Clara muttered. "What was that?" "Nothing." Clara grabbed the coffee pot and started making her father's morning ritual. She knew better than to start a fight today. Today, everything had to be perfect. Today, their salvation was supposed to arrive. Her father, Samuel Hale, sat at the table cleaning his rifle, the one valuable thing he hadn't sold or lost. He was a big man gone soft, with a drinker's red face and hands that shook slightly in the mornings. But today his eyes held a desperate kind of hope. "They should be here by noon," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Cross said noon. He's a man of his word, they say. Ruthless, but reliable." Clara poured his coffee. "And you really think he's going to marry Catherine, just like that? A man he's never met?" Samuel's jaw tightened. "He's looking for a wife. We're offering one. It's business, Clara. Something you wouldn't understand." "Business?" Clara tasted the word like poison. "You mean selling your daughter?" The slap came fast, hard enough to snap her head sideways. Coffee splashed across the table. "You watch your mouth." Samuel's face had gone purple. "Everything I do is for this family. If Cross marries Catherine, he'll help us. He's got money, power, connections. He could save this place." Clara touched her burning cheek, refusing to cry. She'd learned long ago that tears were wasted on Samuel Hale. And what does Catherine think about being sold to a stranger? Catherine knows her duty. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her arm around Catherine's shoulders. "Unlike some people. Now get outside and make sure that yard looks decent. Sweep the porch. Move those broken tools out of sight. And for heaven's sake, stay out of the way when they arrive. The last thing we need is you scaring off our prospects with your appearance. Clara looked at her sister. Catherine wouldn't meet her eyes. Go on. Margaret made a shooing motion. And change that dress. Find something that doesn't make you look like a field hand. Clara walked out, her face still stinging, and stood in the yard trying to breathe. The morning sun beat down merciless and bright. In the distance, dust devils danced across the parched fields. She could see the whole pathetic spread laid out before her, the broken fences, the leaning barn, the desperate poverty they'd tried so hard to hide. And she understood with perfect clarity that she was invisible to them. Not just overlooked, but actually invisible. A pair of hands to work, a back to carry burdens. Nothing more. She'd known it for years, of course, but knowing something and feeling it hit fresh, that was different. Clara spent the morning making everything presentable, which was like putting ribbons on a corpse. She swept and straightened and hid the evidence of their failure as best she could. Catherine appeared on the porch occasionally, practicing her smile, while Margaret coached her on what to say and how to act. Be modest, but not boring. Laugh at his jokes. Don't talk about anything serious. Men don't want women who think too much. Show interest in his ranch, his accomplishments. Make him feel important. The instructions went on and on. Clara blocked them out and kept working. By 11:30, the whole family had gathered on the porch. Samuel had changed into his best suit, threadbare at the elbows, but brushed clean. Margaret wore her church dress. Catherine looked like a porcelain doll, all ribbons and lace and calculated innocence. And Clara stood to the side in her lease-stained work dress, her braid coming loose, dirt still under her fingernails despite her scrubbing. Remember, Samuel told Catherine, gripping her shoulders, everything depends on this. Everything. Be perfect. Catherine nodded, her face pale beneath the powder. For just a moment, Clara saw fear in her sister's eyes. Real fear. Then the dust cloud appeared on the horizon. 3 riders came hard and fast, their horses kicking up a plume that hung in the still air. As they drew closer, Clara could make out details. Powerful animals, expensive tack, men who sat in the saddle like they'd been born there. The lead rider pulled up in front of the house, and the world seemed to shift. He was perhaps 30, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a face carved from granite. He wore range clothes, but they were quality. Nothing flashy, but everything fit and functional. A Colt revolver rode low on his hip. His eyes were the color of winter ice, and when they swept across the porch, Clara felt them like a physical touch. This was Ethan Cross. It had to be. Behind him rode 2 ranch hands, older men with hard faces and harder eyes. They dismounted with fluid efficiency, watching everything, missing nothing. Samuel stepped forward, his smile too wide, too eager. Mr. Cross, welcome, welcome, we're honored. You hail. Ethan's voice was deep, rough with dust and distance. Yes, sir, Samuel Hale, and this is my family. I didn't ride 6 hours for pleasantries. Ethan swung down from his horse with economical grace. My father wants this settled. You need money, I need a wife. Let's see what you're offering. The words were brutal in their honesty. Samuel's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly, gesturing toward Catherine. My daughter Catherine, finest girl in the territory, educated, refined, excellent cook and housekeeper. But Ethan wasn't looking at Catherine. He was looking at Clara. Those ice-blue eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He studied her like he was evaluating a horse, taking in her height, her build, the strength evident in her shoulders and arms. His gaze moved to her hands, noting the calluses and scars, then back to her face. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. She wanted to look away but found she couldn't. Who's that? Ethan asked, still watching Clara. Samuel blinked. That's Clara, my other daughter, but Catherine is the one. How old are you? Ethan addressed Clara directly, cutting off her father mid-sentence. Clara's mouth went dry. 22. You work this ranch? Yes. Do the work yourself or just supervise? Clara almost laughed. Supervise. I do it myself. Cattle? What's left of them? Horses? I can handle them. Cook? Better than I look. The corner of Ethan's mouth might have twitched. Might have. You look like you could work. I can. Mr. Crosson, Samuel interrupted desperately. Catherine is truly the better choice. She's younger, prettier, more refined. I don't need refined. Ethan's eyes never left Clara. I need someone who won't break. Ranch life is hard. My father's harder. You ever been afraid of hard work? No, Clara said honestly. Just afraid of running out of it. This time Ethan definitely smiled, though it was more a baring of teeth than anything warm. He turned to his men. What do you think? The older of the two ranch hands, a grizzled man with a scar across his jaw, studied Clara with professional assessment. She's got the build for it. Hands say she's not afraid of work. Eyes say she's not stupid. He paused. She's not what your father's expecting. My father expects a lot of things he doesn't get, Ethan said flatly. Then, to Samuel, I'll take her. The world stopped. Samuel's face went white. You... what? Clara. I'll marry Clara. Ethan pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag and tossed it to Samuel. It landed heavy and jingling. That's half what we agreed. You'll get the rest after the wedding. We leave today. Today? Margaret's voice rose to a shriek. That's impossible. We haven't prepared. Catherine hasn't. You can't just... I can, and I am. Ethan looked at Clara again. You got belongings you need? Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything was happening too fast, the world tilting sideways in a way that made no sense. Catherine started crying, loud theatrical sobs. Margaret wrapped her arms around her daughter, glaring daggers at Clara, as if this was somehow her fault. Samuel stood frozen, the money pouch in his hands, his face a mask of confusion and greed warring with something that might have been shame. I said, Ethan repeated, his voice harder now, do you have belongings? Clara forced her brain to work. Not much. Get them. We leave in 10 minutes. Now wait just a minute, Samuel found his voice. You can't just take her without... We had an arrangement. Catherine was supposed to... Arrangement was for a wife. Ethan's hand rested on his gun, casual but unmistakable. I chose one. You got paid. We're done talking. He turned his back on Samuel Hale, a deliberate insult, and walked to the water trough, letting his horse drink. Clara stood paralyzed. This couldn't be happening. Men didn't just choose her. Men looked past her, through her, around her. She was the daughter in the background, the one who worked while others were courted. But Ethan Cross had looked directly at her and said her name. Clara. Her father's voice shook. Get inside. She looked at him. Really looked at him. At this man who'd raised her with indifference at best, cruelty at worst, who'd worked her like a mule and never once thanked her, who'd been ready to sell her sister and thought nothing of it. And she realized he wanted her to refuse, wanted her to reject Ethan so he could salvage the deal, push Catherine forward instead, get what he'd originally planned. He wanted her to sacrifice herself one more time. No, Clara heard herself say. Samuel's eyes widened. What did you just say to me? I said no. Strength flooded through her, sudden and fierce. He chose me. He paid you. I'm going. You ungrateful... Samuel lunged forward, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. After everything I've... Let her go! Ethan's voice cut across the yard, quiet, but absolutely lethal. Samuel's hand spasmed open. He turned to find Ethan standing 10 feet away, every line of his body radiating controlled violence. She's my daughter, Samuel tried. I have rights. You sold those rights 10 seconds ago. Ethan's eyes were empty of everything but cold certainty. Touch her again, and I'll break your arm. Clear? The two ranch hands had moved up behind Ethan, hands near their weapons. The message was unmistakable. Samuel stepped back, his face mottled red and white. Clara didn't wait for permission. She walked into the house on shaking legs, climbed to the tiny room she'd shared with Catherine for 22 years, and grabbed the canvas bag she used for supplies. What did she own? Not much. 2 changes of clothes. A hairbrush her mother, her real mother, dead these 15 years, had given her. A book of poetry she'd traded for at the general store. A knife for working leather. That was it. That was her whole life fitting in a bag she could carry with one hand. Catherine appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her carefully powdered face. "How could you?" she whispered. "You knew I was supposed to marry him. You knew this was my chance." "Your chance?" Clara turned on her sister, years of resentment boiling over. "Your chance to do what? Be sold to a stranger? Live your whole life as a prize someone else won?" "At least I would have been chosen for the right reasons," Catherine shot back. "He didn't choose you because he wants you. He chose you because you're strong like an ox, because you can work. That's not being chosen, Clara. That's being purchased like livestock." The words hit like knives, because they were true. Ethan hadn't chosen her out of love or desire or anything remotely romantic. He'd chosen her because she looked like she could survive, because his ranch needed workers, and she clearly knew how to work. It shouldn't have hurt, but it did. "Maybe that's all I'm good for," Clara said quietly, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "But it's more than I ever got here." She walked past her sister, down the stairs, out onto the porch where her father and stepmother stood frozen in shock and fury. Margaret found her voice first. "If you do this, you're not welcome back, ever. Do you understand me? You walk away from this family. You're dead to us." Clara looked at the woman who'd made her life miserable for 15 years. "I've been dead to you since the day you married my father. Might as well make it official." She descended the porch steps. Ethan stood waiting by his horse, his face unreadable. Up close, he was even more imposing, 6 feet of solid muscle and controlled power, with eyes that missed nothing. "You can ride?" he asked. "Yes." He gestured to one of the spare horses his men had brought. "Then mount up. It's a long trip, and we're burning daylight." Clara approached the horse, a solid bay mare with intelligent eyes. She'd grown up riding, but never a horse this fine, never with tack this expensive. She put her foot in the stirrup and swung up, settling into the saddle with practiced ease. Behind her, she heard her father's voice. "Clara! Clara, wait! The money isn't enough. He promised more. Tell him we need—" But Clara didn't turn around, didn't look back. Ethan mounted his own horse with fluid grace. "Let's go." They rode out of the yard at a trot, dust rising behind them. Clara kept her eyes forward, refusing to glance back at the only home she'd ever known, refusing to acknowledge the shouting voices that followed them down the road. She'd made her choice. In one impossible moment, everything had changed. The morning sun climbed higher as they rode, turning the Montana landscape into a study in gold and shadow. The 2 ranch hands flanked them. The scarred one introduced himself as Dutch, the younger as Murphy. They were polite but distant, clearly waiting to see how this would play out. Ethan rode in silence, his attention on the terrain. After an hour, Clara's courage finally surfaced. "Why did you choose me?" Ethan didn't look at her. "You want the truth or something pretty?" "Truth. My father's dying. Cancer, the doctors say. He's got maybe a year, probably less." Ethan's voice stayed flat, emotionless. "Before he goes, he wants to see me married. Wants to know the ranch will have a woman running the house, bearing children, keeping things civilized." "Civilized?" Clara repeated. "His word, not mine." Ethan finally glanced at her. "He sent me to find a wife, gave me a list of families who might be desperate enough to agree. Yours was first. And you saw Catherine and rejected her." "I saw Catherine and knew she'd last maybe 3 months. She's soft, weak. My father would eat her alive within a week." Ethan's eyes were brutally honest. "You, on the other hand, you looked like you could take a punch and keep standing." "That's what you want? Someone who can take a punch?" "I want someone who won't break when things get hard. And things get hard at the Cross Ranch." He paused. "I'm not looking for love, Clara. I'm not going to promise you romance or happiness or any of that nonsense. What I can promise is work, respect if you earn it, and a roof over your head. That enough for you?" Clara thought about her father's house, about years of invisible labor and constant criticism, about watching her sister be valued for her face while Clara was valued for her back. "It's more than I had before," she said. Ethan nodded. "Then we understand each other." They rode on. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled west, the scrubland giving way to rolling hills dotted with cattle. More cattle than Clara had seen in years. fat, healthy animals grazing on decent grass. "That's all yours?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "Crossland starts about 3 miles back," Dutch offered, speaking up for the first time in hours. "Runs for about 30 miles north to south, 20 miles east to west. Biggest spread in the territory." Clara did the math and felt her stomach drop. That's 600 square miles, give or take," Murphy grinned. "Welcome to the Empire, ma'am." Empire. The word felt impossible. She'd gone from a dying homestead to an empire in the space of one morning. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, buildings appeared in the distance. Clara had expected something rough, maybe a large cabin and some outbuildings. What she saw instead made her breath catch. The Cross Ranch was a compound. A massive 2-story main house dominated the center, built from stone and timber with a wide wraparound porch. Barns and stables stretched out to either side, all in good repair. Corrals held dozens of horses. Bunkhouses for the ranch hands stood in neat rows. She could see a smithy, a smokehouse, storage buildings, equipment sheds. It was a self-contained world, and everywhere, people. Cowboys working horses in the corrals, men loading wagons, women hanging laundry, children running between buildings. They all stopped and stared as Ethan's group rode in. "Word travels fast out here," Dutch muttered. "They know you went for a bride." Ethan ignored the stares and rode straight to the main house. He dismounted with that same economical grace, then offered Clara a hand down. She didn't need it. She could dismount on her own, but she took it anyway, testing these new rules. His hand was calloused, strong, warm. The front door of the house swung open, and Clara's first thought was, "I'm going to die here," because the man who emerged looked like death itself. Victor Cross stood maybe 6 feet tall, though age had begun to bow his shoulders. He'd been powerfully built once. Clara could see the ghost of it in his frame. Now illness had carved him down to sinew and bone. His skin stretched tight over sharp features. His eyes were the same ice blue as Ethan's, but where Ethan's held cold calculation, Victor's burned with something fiercer. Anger, pride, the absolute refusal to yield. He leaned on a cane, but even weakened, his presence filled the space like a physical force. Those burning eyes fixed on Clara, and she felt herself being dissected, evaluated, and judged in the space of 3 heartbeats. "This is what you brought me?" Victor's voice came out rough as gravel. "This field hand?" "This is Clara Hale," Ethan said evenly. "My wife-to-be. I sent you for breeding stock, not a workhorse." Victor descended the porch steps slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. Up close, Clara could see the pain etched in every line of his face. "Look at her. She's too tall, too rough, too strong," Clara heard herself say. "Too capable? Too likely to survive whatever you throw at her." The words came out before she could stop them. Horror flooded through her. She just talked back to Victor Cross, ruler of this empire, dying or not. Silence fell like a hammer. Then Victor laughed. It was an ugly sound, more cough than humor, but genuine. "She's got a mouth on her, at least. That's something." He looked at Ethan. "You told her about me." "I told her you were dying." "Did you tell her I'm mean as a snake and twice as poisonous?" "I figured she'd learn that soon enough." Victor studied Clara again, his eyes narrowed. "You ever run a household this size, girl?" "No, sir." "Can you cook for 30 men?" "I can learn." "Can you manage staff, order supplies, keep accounts?" "I said I can learn." "Learning costs time. Time costs money. Money is something you have plenty of," Clara interrupted, surprising herself again. "Unless everything I'm seeing is a lie. You want someone who already knows everything. Hire a housekeeper. You want someone who'll fight to make this work? You've got me." Victor's cane tapped against the porch boards. Once, twice. "You always this mouthy?" "Only when I'm terrified." Another rough laugh. "At least you're honest." He turned to Ethan. "She'll do. Though heaven help us all when she figures out what kind of mess she's walked into." He started back toward the house, then paused. "Wedding's in 3 days. That enough time to make her presentable?" "I'll work with what I've got," a new voice said from the doorway. A woman emerged from the house, 50-something, weathered but handsome, with iron gray hair and sharp green eyes. She wore a simple dress but carried herself with quiet authority. This is Ruth, Ethan told Clara. She runs the house, has for 20 years. If you're smart, you'll listen to everything she says. Ruth descended the steps and circled Clara like a general inspecting troops. Tall, strong, good bones. Hands say she's not afraid of work. She lifted Clara's chin, studying her face. Pretty enough when you clean her up. I say she's got sense. She dropped her hand. I can work with this. I'm standing right here, Clara said. Yes, you are. And if you're going to survive here, you'll learn when to speak and when to keep your mouth shut. Ruth's tone wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. Come with me. You need a bath, clean clothes, and about 100 other things before you're fit to be seen at dinner. I should help with the horses. The horses are handled. You're the priority now. Ruth took Clara's bag. Say goodbye to your intended. You won't see him again until dinner. Clara looked at Ethan, suddenly uncertain. He nodded once, dismissing her. She followed Ruth into the house. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Hardwood floors, real furniture, rugs that probably cost more than her father's entire ranch. A massive staircase led to the second floor. Doors opened onto what looked like a formal dining room, a library, a sitting room. Victor built all this, Ruth said, leading Clara upstairs. Started with nothing 30 years ago. Just him and a dream, and enough meanness to make it real. She opened a door to a bedroom that made Clara's breath catch. It was bigger than the entire cabin she'd grown up in. A massive bed dominated one wall. A wardrobe stood against another. Real glass windows let in golden afternoon light. A private washstand sat in the corner. This is... Clara couldn't find words. This is yours. Ruth set the bag down. Bathrooms through that door. Yes, we have indoor plumbing. Victor spared no expense. Water won't be hot yet, but it'll do for washing. I'll have some dresses brought up. You're taller than most, but we'll make do. She started to leave, then paused. Clara? I don't know what you're running from or what you're hoping to find here, but I'll tell you this for free. The crossmen are hard. This life is harder. If you're looking for easy, you've come to the wrong place. I've never looked for easy, Clara said. Just honest. Ruth's expression softened slightly. Then you might do all right after all. She left, closing the door behind her. Clara stood alone in the massive bedroom, still wearing her dusty traveling clothes, and tried to process what had happened. This morning she'd been the invisible daughter of a failing rancher. Now she stood in a palace, engaged to a man she didn't know, about to become part of something vast and powerful and dangerous. She walked to the window and looked out over the ranch. Cowboys were driving cattle toward the evening pastures. Smoke rose from the cookhouse. The whole compound hummed with organized activity. And somewhere out there was Ethan Cross, the man who'd chosen her not for her face or her grace, but for her capacity to endure. Clara touched the window glass, feeling its solidity. Real glass. Real walls, real life. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she let herself feel something besides exhaustion and resignation. She felt afraid, yes. Uncertain, absolutely. But also, and this surprised her, she felt alive. The water in the bathroom was cold but clean. Clara stripped off her dusty clothes and scrubbed away the layers of dirt and sweat in her old life. She washed her hair 3 times until it squeaked clean. She examined her reflection in the mirror, a luxury she'd rarely had, and saw a stranger looking back, tall, strong, scarred, not beautiful, but not broken either. Maybe that would be enough. A knock came at the bedroom door. Ruth entered with an armful of dresses. These should work for tonight. Tomorrow we'll have the seamstress make adjustments. She laid them on the bed. Dinner's at 7 sharp. Victor doesn't tolerate lateness. Ethan will come to escort you down. Clara chose the simplest of the dresses, a dark blue cotton that fit reasonably well. Ruth helped her with the buttons and taught her how to arrange her hair in something more sophisticated than her usual braid. When they finished, Ruth stepped back and nodded approval. There, now you look like you belong here. But Clara didn't feel like she belonged. She felt like an imposter wearing borrowed clothes in a borrowed life. 7 o'clock came too fast. The knock on her door made her jump. Ethan stood in the hallway, changed into clean clothes but still wearing his gun. His eyes swept over her, clinical as before, noting the transformation without comment. "You clean up all right," was all he said. Thanks, Clara replied dryly. You really know how to make a girl feel special. The corner of his mouth twitched. Come on, my father's waiting. He offered his arm. Clara took it, feeling the solid muscle beneath the fabric. They descended the staircase together, her hand resting lightly on his sleeve, and entered the dining room. Clara stopped in the doorway, overwhelmed. The table could seat 20 easily. Tonight maybe a dozen people occupied the chairs, Victor at the head, Ruth beside him, and others Clara didn't recognize. All conversation ceased as she entered, every eye fixed on her. Ethan guided her to a seat beside his own, across from Victor. As Clara sat, she caught whispers. Awfully plain. Where did he find her? Victor must be furious. Victor's cane rapped against the table. If you're going to gossip, do it where I can't hear you. He fixed the speakers with a glare that could strip paint. This is Clara Hale. In 3 days, she'll be Clara Cross. You'll treat her with respect or you'll find work elsewhere. Clear? Murmured assents rippled around the table. Dinner was served, beef so tender it fell apart, vegetables Clara couldn't name, bread that was actually soft. She ate mechanically, hyper-aware of being watched and judged. Victor held court throughout the meal, discussing ranch business with casual brutality. A cattle buyer who'd tried to cheat them. A dispute over water rights with a neighboring ranch. Plans to expand into new territory. Clara listened and learned. Victor Cross ran his empire through fear, cunning, and absolute ruthlessness. People who crossed him regretted it. People who served him well were rewarded handsomely, but never trusted. And Ethan sat silent through most of it, speaking only when directly addressed, his face revealing nothing. So, Clara, Victor said suddenly, pinning her with those burning eyes. Tell me about your family. The question was a trap. Clara could feel it. Nothing worth telling, she said carefully. Indulge me. Small ranch, failed crops, bad decisions, the usual story. Your father in debt? Yes. How much? Clara met his eyes steadily. Enough that he was willing to sell his daughter to clear it. Victor's smile was sharp as broken glass. At least you're not stupid enough to pretend otherwise. Ethan paid him, I assume. Half up front, half after the wedding. Good. Then he's got incentive to keep his mouth shut about the real arrangement. Victor took a sip of wine. Let me be clear about something, girl. I don't care about your feelings. I don't care about romance or happiness or any of that nonsense. What I care about is legacy. This ranch needs an heir. Ethan needs a wife who can give him sons and run this house without falling apart. Can you do that? The question was brutal in its honesty. Around the table, people shifted uncomfortably. Clara thought about lying, thought about saying what he wanted to hear. Instead, she said, I don't know, but I'll try my damnedest to figure it out. Silence. Then Victor laughed, that same rough cough laugh from before. By God, she's honest. That's worth something. He raised his glass. To honesty. May it last longer than most things around here. The others raised their glasses uncertainly. Clara raised hers too, meeting Victor's eyes over the rim. And she understood. This was her first test. Not the only one, probably not even the hardest one, but the first. She'd passed. Barely. After dinner, Ethan walked her back to her room. They climbed the stairs in silence, the house settling around them for the night. At her door, Clara turned to face him. Thank you for choosing me. I know you had reasons, but still. Thank you. Ethan studied her with those cold blue eyes. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen what you're really up against. Your father? My father's dying. He'll be gone within a year. Ethan leaned against the doorframe. I'm what you need to worry about. Clara's breath caught. Are you threatening me? I'm being honest, same as you were at dinner. He straightened. I meant what I said this afternoon. I'm not looking for love. I'm looking for someone who can survive, someone who can stand beside me when this whole thing tries to tear itself apart. He paused. My father built this empire on blood and lies and broken promises. It's rotten at the foundation. When he dies, all of that comes due. And whoever's standing next to me when that happens needs to be strong enough to weather the storm. What kind of storm? The kind that destroys everything. He said it so calmly, like he was discussing the weather, but Clara heard the steel underneath. Then why stay? She asked. Why not just walk away? Because it's mine. All the good and all the bad. All the blood that was spilled to build it. Ethan's eyes were hard as winter ice. I'm not my father. I won't run this place the same way he did, but I also won't let it fall apart because it was built on ugly truths. I'll tear down what needs tearing down and rebuild it honest. But that takes time and strength and someone willing to stand in the fire with me while I do it. Clara understood then, with perfect clarity, what he was really saying. He wasn't offering her safety. He was offering her a war. You could have lied to me, she said quietly. Could have promised me easy things. Why didn't you? Because I need you to choose this with your eyes open. Need you to understand what you're signing up for. He met her gaze. If you want to back out, now's the time. I'll pay your father the rest of what I promised him. You can go home. Home. The word felt foreign. That place hadn't been home in years if it ever had been. Clara thought about her choices. She could go back to invisibility and slow suffocation, or she could stay here and fight for something that might destroy her. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Ethan nodded once, satisfied. Good. Get some sleep. Tomorrow Ruth starts teaching you everything you'll need to know. It won't be gentle. He walked away down the hallway, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. Clara entered her room and closed the door. She leaned against it, heart pounding. What had she done? She'd chosen a stranger over her family, chosen an uncertain future over a miserable certainty, chosen to fight instead of fade. And terrifying as it was, it felt right. Clara crossed to the window and looked out over the ranch. Lights glowed in the bunkhouses. Night sounds drifted up, cattle lowing, horses moving in their stalls, men's voices carrying across the distance. This was her world now, this empire built on blood and lies. This man who promised her nothing but honesty and hardship. She thought about her sister Catherine, probably crying into her pillow back at the homestead, about her father counting his money, about Margaret cursing Clara's name. Let them. For the first time in her life, Clara Hale belonged to herself, not to their expectations, not to their plans, not to their failures, to herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth fighting for. She climbed into the massive bed, still wearing the borrowed dress, and pulled the clean sheets around her. The mattress was soft. The pillows were reeled down. Through the walls, she could hear the house breathing, settling, alive with possibility and danger. Clara closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new tests, new ways to fail or succeed. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something besides resignation. She felt hope. Dangerous, fragile, terrifying hope. And in the darkness of her borrowed room in this empire of secrets, Clara smiled. The choice had been made. Now came the hard part. Now came everything else. Dawn came brutal and unforgiving, light knifing through the curtains at an hour Clara's body recognized, even if her mind didn't want to. She'd slept poorly, half convinced she'd wake up back in her old room, that yesterday had been some fever dream born of desperation and exhaustion. But the sheets were too soft, the room too large. And when she opened her eyes, she saw carved wooden beams overhead instead of cracked plaster. It had been real. Before she could fully process that thought, someone knocked hard on her door. 3 sharp raps that said business, not courtesy. You've got 10 minutes? Ruth's voice called through the wood. Breakfast doesn't wait, and neither do I. Clara scrambled out of bed, her muscles protesting. The borrowed dress from last night was wrinkled beyond salvation. She dug through her canvas bag for her work clothes, faded, patched, but at least familiar, and dressed quickly. Her fingers fumbled with buttons she'd buttoned 1,000 times before. Everything felt strange, like her own skin didn't fit right. She splashed water on her face from the basin, dragged a comb through her hair, and tied it back in her usual braid. When she opened the door, Ruth stood waiting with the patience of someone who'd learned long ago that impatience wasted more time than it saved. The older woman's eyes swept over Clara's outfit without comment, but her mouth tightened at the corners. That won't do for long, but it'll work for this morning. She started down the hallway at a brisk pace. Keep up. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and I don't repeat myself. Clara followed her down the stairs and through a maze of hallways that all looked the same. The house was already awake. She could hear voices from distant rooms, footsteps overhead, the clatter of dishes somewhere close by. They emerged into the kitchen, and Clara stopped dead. It was bigger than her father's entire house. Two massive wood-burning stoves dominated one wall. Work tables stretched down the center. Shelves lined with supplies reached toward the ceiling, and everywhere people moved with choreographed efficiency. Three women Clara didn't recognize, all working in synchronized silence. "This is Maria, Beth, and Susan," Ruth said, gesturing to each in turn. "They handle the cooking and serving. You'll work with them until you understand how this kitchen operates." She moved to one of the work tables where Doe sat waiting. "We feed 32 people 3 times a day. That's 96 meals, every day. No exceptions, no excuses. If someone's sick, someone else covers. If supplies run low, we make do. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am, I'm Ruth. You call me Ruth, and I'll call you Clara, and we'll get along fine." She handed Clara an apron. "Put that on. You're starting with bread." For the next 4 hours, Clara learned what real work looked like. She thought she knew hard labor. She'd hauled water, split wood, worked until her hands bled and her back screamed. But this was different. This wasn't just labor. It was precision under pressure. Every loaf had to be identical, every batch timed perfectly, every dish prepared to exacting standards because Victor Cross accepted nothing less than perfection. Maria, a stout Mexican woman with flour perpetually dusting her dark hair, demonstrated kneading technique. "You need to feel the dough. It talks to you if you listen. Too dry, add water. Too wet, more flour. The temperature matters. The humidity matters. Everything matters." Clara's hands, so accustomed to rough work, struggled with the gentleness required. She tore through the dough instead of folding it, added too much flour, then too much water trying to compensate. By her third attempt, frustration burned hot in her chest. "This is impossible," she muttered. "This is bread," Maria corrected, not unkindly. "And if you can't master bread, you'll never manage the rest." Beth, younger and blonde with nervous hands, was setting tables in the dining room. She showed Clara the exact placement of every fork, knife, and spoon. "Mr. Cross notices everything. If something's wrong, even an inch out of place, he'll see it, and he'll say something." She lowered her voice. "He made the last girl cry for putting the water glasses on the wrong side." "The last girl?" Clara asked. Beth's eyes widened, and she glanced at Ruth. "I shouldn't have. I didn't mean—" "It's fine," Ruth cut in. "Clara should know the truth anyway." She faced Clara directly. "You're not the first woman Ethan's brought home. There was another, about 2 years ago. Victor's idea, a banker's daughter from Denver, educated, refined, everything he thought the ranch needed. What happened to her? She lasted 6 weeks. Couldn't handle the work, couldn't handle Victor, couldn't handle the isolation. One morning we woke up and she was gone. Left a note saying she'd rather be disgraced back east than buried alive out here." Ruth's expression remained neutral. Victor was furious. Ethan was relieved, I think. She wasn't right for this place. Wrong kind of strength. Clara absorbed this information while her hands worked the dough, finally beginning to understand the rhythm Maria had tried to teach her. "And you think I'm the right kind of strength? I think you're still here, which is more than she managed." Ruth moved to check something on the stove. "But being here isn't enough. You need to prove you can survive it." The morning bled into afternoon. Clara moved from bread to preparing vegetables, mountains of potatoes, carrots, onions. Her knife skills were adequate but slow. Susan, a rail-thin woman who rarely spoke, demonstrated proper technique with movements so fast Clara could barely track them. "You'll get faster," Susan said, her voice soft as morning fog, "or your hands will give out. Either way, you'll learn." By the time lunch was served, Clara's back ached and her fingers were cramping. But the bread she'd made, her 4th attempt, came out of the oven golden and perfect. Maria tested it, tearing off a piece and tasting critically. "Good," she finally said. "Not great, but good. You can learn. That matters more than natural talent." Clara ate standing up in the kitchen, too tired to sit. Through the doorway, she could see the dining room where Ethan sat with his father and several ranch hands, discussing something that involved a lot of gesturing at papers spread across the table. Ethan's face was unreadable as always, but Victor's burned with intensity despite his obvious pain. "They're planning the fall roundup," Ruth said, appearing at Clara's elbow. "Biggest event of the year. Every hand on the ranch works it, plus hired help from town. We'll be feeding 50, maybe 60 people for 2 weeks straight." Clara's exhausted brain tried to process that number. 60 people? "Welcome to the Cross Ranch." Ruth's smile held no humor. "You thought today was hard? This was easy. Wait until you see what comes next." That afternoon brought lessons in household management. Ruth led Clara through the storage rooms, showing her the careful inventory system. Every sack of flour, every barrel of salt, every crate of canned goods was logged and tracked. Waste was sin in Victor Cross's world. "He grew up with nothing," Ruth explained, running her finger down a ledger filled with neat handwriting. "Fought for every inch of ground this ranch sits on. Made enemies doing it. So he doesn't tolerate waste, doesn't tolerate laziness, and definitely doesn't tolerate excuses." She looked up at Clara. "You need to understand, Victor's not just hard because he enjoys it. He's hard because this world tried to break him, and he refused. Now he tests everyone the same way." "Did it work on you?" Ruth's laugh was dry. "I've been here 20 years. What do you think?" They moved through the house, Ruth pointing out details Clara would be expected to know. Which floorboards creaked, which windows stuck, where the good china was kept for special occasions, how to manage the household accounts, the proper way to address visitors based on their rank and relationship to the ranch. It was overwhelming, impossible. Clara's mind struggled to hold on to even a fraction of the information being thrown at her. "I can't remember all this," she finally admitted. "You will. You'll have to." Ruth stopped at a window overlooking the corrals where cowboys worked horses. "See those men? Most of them have been with the Cross family for years. They're loyal to Victor and by extension to Ethan, but they don't trust easily. You're an outsider, a question mark. Until you prove yourself, they'll be watching for you to fail. And if I do fail, then you become a story they tell. Another city girl who couldn't hack ranch life." Ruth's voice softened slightly. "But I don't think you will. You've got something that last girl didn't." "What's that?" "You know what hard looks like. You're not afraid of it." Ruth turned from the window. "Come on. Time for you to meet the seamstress. Can't have you wearing work rags to your own wedding." The seamstress was a severe woman named Mrs. Kowalski who ran her operation from a room near the back of the house. She took one look at Clara and sighed deeply, the sound of someone presented with an impossible task. "Too tall," she muttered in a thick Polish accent, circling Clara with a measuring tape. "Too thin in some places, too thick in others, and the wedding is when? 3 days?" Another sigh. "Victor Cross asks for miracles. Fine, I give him miracles." She took measurements with ruthless efficiency, calling out numbers to her assistant, a young girl who wrote everything down with careful precision. The whole time, Mrs. Kowalski kept up a running commentary in a mixture of English and Polish, most of it unflattering. "At least she stands up straight. Last girl slouched like question mark. And the hands, good, working hands. Can't make silk purse from sow's ear, but can make decent dress from decent frame." She pulled the measuring tape tight around Clara's waist, making her gasp. "You eat more. Too skinny. Men don't want to marry skeleton." "Ethan doesn't seem to care about that," Clara managed. Mrs. Kowalski snorted. "Ethan cares about same thing his father cares about. Does job get done? You do job, he's happy. Simple." She stepped back, examining Clara with a critical eye. "Wedding dress will be cream, not white. White shows every stain, and you'll be working before the ink dries on the certificate. Practical, sturdy, maybe pretty if I'm feeling generous." "I don't need pretty." "Everyone needs pretty sometimes." Mrs. Kowalski's voice was surprisingly gentle. "Even here, especially here. You'll see." By the time Clara escaped the seamstress, afternoon had worn into evening. She was exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical labor. Her mind felt stuffed with information, her nerves raw from constant evaluation. Ruth found her standing in the hallway, looking lost. "Dinner's in an hour," the older woman said. "You should rest." Tomorrow will be worse. How can it be worse? Tomorrow, Victor starts testing you personally. Today was just orientation. Ruth's expression was sympathetic but firm. Get some sleep while you can. Clara climbed the stairs to her room, every step an effort. Inside, she found that someone had brought more clothes, simple dresses, work skirts, undergarments that actually fit. On the bed lay a note in elegant handwriting. For tomorrow. Try not to destroy them immediately. R. She managed a tired smile. Ruth's sense of humor was dry as desert sand, but it was there. Clara stripped off her work clothes and washed using the basin. Her face in the mirror looked different somehow. Harder. More present, like she was coming into focus after years of being deliberately blurred. She pulled on a nightgown, another borrowed piece, and climbed into bed. Through the window, she could hear the ranch settling for the night, horses moving in their stalls, men's voices from the bunkhouses, the distant lowing of cattle. This was her world now. This harsh, demanding, unforgiving place where failure meant becoming a cautionary tale and success meant what? Survival? Respect? Something more? Clara closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept circling back to Ethan, to the way he'd looked at her in the yard yesterday, evaluating, calculating, choosing her like he'd choose a horse. No romance, no pretense, just brutal honesty. And somehow, that was better than every pretty lie she'd ever been told. A knock at her door made her eyes snap open. She sat up, heart pounding. Yes? It's Ethan. Can I come in? Clara's pulse kicked higher. She was in her nightgown, hair loose, completely unprepared for company. But this was going to be her husband in 3 days. Might as well start getting used to it. Come in. The door opened. Ethan stood in the hallway, still dressed, looking like he'd just come from the barns. He stayed in the doorway, proper enough not to enter but close enough to talk quietly. Ruth says you did well today, he said without preamble. Ruth's being generous. Ruth doesn't do generous. If she says you did well, you did well. He leaned against the doorframe. My father wants to see you tomorrow, after breakfast. Clara's stomach tightened. For what? To talk. To test you. To see if you're really what I think you are. Ethan's eyes were unreadable in the dim light. Be honest with him. He values honesty over everything else, but be careful too. He'll use whatever you tell him. Use it how? However he needs to. Victor's dying, but he's not weak, and he's got plans that involve you whether you know it or not. Ethan straightened. Just remember, you're marrying me, not him. What he wants doesn't matter as much as what we want. And what do we want? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. To survive what comes after he's gone. Everything else is negotiable. He started to leave, then paused. Clara? You did good today, really. Don't let tomorrow shake you. Then he was gone, footsteps receding down the hallway. Clara lay back down, her mind racing. Victor wanted to see her, to test her, to see if she measured up to whatever impossible standard he'd set. She thought about running, about grabbing her canvas bag and slipping out in the night, riding one of those fine horses as far as it would take her before anyone noticed she was gone. But where would she go? Back to her father's failing ranch? Back to invisibility and slow suffocation? No. She'd made her choice. Now she had to live with it. Clara finally drifted into uneasy sleep, her dreams filled with ice-blue eyes and impossible tests, and a dying man who held the fate of an empire in his failing grip. Morning came too soon. Ruth appeared at dawn with the same 3 sharp knocks, and the whole brutal cycle began again. Breakfast preparation, bread that had to be perfect, tables that had to be set precisely, coffee strong enough to strip paint the way Victor liked it. Clara's hands moved through the familiar motions, but her mind kept jumping ahead to the meeting that waited after the meal. When breakfast was served, she caught Ethan's eye across the dining room. He gave her the smallest nod. Encouragement or warning, she couldn't tell. Victor ate in silence, his face tight with pain he refused to acknowledge. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Clara felt his gaze on her several times as she helped serve, evaluating, judging. After the meal, after the dishes were cleared and the kitchen cleaned, Ruth found Clara. He's ready for you. His study. Third door on the left down the east hallway. She straightened Clara's collar. Remember what Ethan told you. Honest, but careful. Clara's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists and walked toward Victor's study like she was walking toward an execution. The door was open. Victor sat behind a massive desk, papers spread before him, a glass of whiskey at his elbow, despite the early hour. He looked up as she appeared. Come in. Shut the door. Sit. Clara obeyed, settling into the chair across from him. This close, she could see the toll the cancer was taking, the yellowing of his skin, the tremor in his hands he tried to hide. The way he held himself like movement caused pain, but his eyes burned clear and fierce. You know I'm dying, he said flatly. Yes, sir. Good. No point dancing around it. He took a sip of whiskey. What you probably don't know is that I've got maybe 6 months. Maybe less. The doctors say the cancer's in my bones now, eating me from the inside out. He said it like he was discussing the weather. Before I go, I need to know this ranch will survive. That means Ethan needs to be ready, and that means you need to be ready. I'm trying. Trying isn't good enough. Victor's voice cracked like a whip. This empire took 30 years to build. 30 years of blood and sweat and choices that would make lesser men vomit. I started with nothing, less than nothing, a patch of dirt and a dream and enough rage to fuel a war. He leaned forward. You know what this territory was like 30 years ago? Lawless, brutal. The strong took what they wanted and the weak died. I was strong, so I took. Clara said nothing, just listened. I took land, water rights, cattle, whatever I needed to survive and grow. Victor's smile was sharp as broken glass. Made enemies doing it. Lots of them. Some of them are still out there, waiting for me to show weakness, waiting for a chance to take back what they think I stole. Did you? Clara asked. Steal it? Victor's laugh was ugly. Depends on who you ask. I took land that wasn't being used efficiently, took water from people who were wasting it, took opportunity where I found it. Was it legal? Mostly. Was it ethical? He shrugged. Ethics are for people who can afford them. I couldn't. And now? Now I'm dying, and all those old debts are coming due. All those enemies are circling. They think when I'm gone, Ethan will be weak, that he'll give back what I took, that this whole empire will crumble. Victor's eyes burned into Clara. They're wrong, but only if you're strong enough to stand beside him when it happens. Clara's throat was dry. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand what you're walking into. This isn't some romantic story where love conquers all. This is war. A war that's been brewing for 30 years, and when I die, it's going to explode. He drained his whiskey. Ethan's a good man, better than me. He wants to do things honest, do them right. That's admirable. It's also dangerous, because our enemies don't care about honor. They care about revenge. What do you want from me? I want you to keep him alive. Victor's voice dropped to something almost gentle. I want you to be smart when he's righteous, hard when he's merciful. I want you to do whatever it takes to protect what we've built, even if it means getting your hands dirty. Clara thought about everything she'd learned in the past 2 days, about the careful inventory systems, the loyal ranch hands, the massive operation that ran like a military campaign. This wasn't just a ranch, it was a fortress. And Victor was asking her to help defend it. I don't know if I can do what you're asking, she said honestly. You can, because you already understand the most important truth. Victor smiled. You know that survival matters more than comfort, that strength matters more than kindness, that sometimes to protect what you love, you have to become what you fear. I never said I loved this place. You will. Give it time. He poured another whiskey. Ruth tells me you did well yesterday, that you didn't complain, didn't cry, didn't quit. That's good. That's what I need to see. He paused. Your father sold you, your family threw you away, so now you're ours, and the Cross family protects its own. But we also demand loyalty. Absolute, unquestioning. Can you give me that? Clara thought about her father counting his money, about Catherine crying for a future that was never real, about Margaret's threats and rejection. Yes, she said. I can give you that. Victor studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Then we understand each other. He gestured to the door. Get out. You've got work to do. Ruth's waiting. Clara stood, turned to leave. Clara? She looked back. Welcome to the family, Victor said. Try not to disappoint me. It wasn't kindness in his voice. It was possession. But Clara was learning that on the Cross Ranch, possession was the closest thing to love she was likely to get. She left the study with her head spinning and found Ruth waiting in the hallway. Well? The older woman asked. He's terrifying. Yes, he is. Ruth started walking. He's also dying, and scared and desperate to leave something behind that won't crumble the moment he's gone. She glanced at Clara. What did he ask you for? Loyalty. And to keep Ethan alive when the war comes. Ruth stopped walking. He told you about the war? Enough. Then you know more than most. Ruth's face was grave. Clara, listen to me carefully. Victor built this empire on foundations that won't hold forever. There are land disputes that were never properly settled, water rights that were taken by force, deals made with threats instead of contracts. When he dies, all of that becomes Ethan's problem. And Ethan, she trailed off. Ethan what? Ethan wants to fix it, wants to make things right. But making things right means admitting his father was wrong, means giving back things that people here depend on, means tearing down and rebuilding, and not everyone will survive that process. Ruth's eyes were sad. Victor knows this. That's why he's so desperate to find someone strong enough to stand with Ethan through it. Someone who won't flinch when the hard choices come. Clara absorbed this, pieces clicking into place. You think I'm that person? I think you might be, if you don't break first. Ruth resumed walking. Come on, the afternoon won't wait, and Mrs. Kowalski wants another fitting. The next 2 days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and learning. Clara worked in the kitchen until her hands cramped, memorized the household systems until her head ached, endured Mrs. Kowalski's fittings and Ruth's relentless instruction and the constant evaluation of everyone around her. She saw Ethan only in passing, at meals, across the yard, in brief moments stolen between endless tasks. He was always working, always moving, shouldering the burden of running the ranch while his father slowly died upstairs. Once, she found him in the barn late at night, checking on a mare about to foal. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tension in every line of his body. You should rest, Clara said from the doorway. Ethan didn't look up from examining the horse. So should you. But here we both are. Clara stepped into the barn. Your father talked to me, told me about the war that's coming. Did he scare you? Yes. Good. You should be scared. I am. Ethan finally looked at her. But I'm also grateful that you're still here, that you haven't run. Where would I run to? Anywhere. Somewhere easier, somewhere safe. He straightened. You still can, you know. Wedding's tomorrow, but even after that, if it gets too hard, stop. Clara moved closer. Stop giving me escape routes. Stop assuming I'm going to break. I'm here. I'm staying. And I'll do whatever needs doing to make this work. Ethan studied her in the lamplight. You mean that? I do. Something shifted in his expression, not warmth exactly, but recognition, respect. Then maybe we actually have a chance. The mare shifted and Ethan turned back to his work. Clara watched him for a moment longer, then left him to his vigil. The day before the wedding, Clara woke before dawn with her stomach in knots. Today was the final fitting. Today she'd see the dress that would mark her transformation from invisible daughter to Clara Cross. Mrs. Kowalski had worked miracles. The dress was simple but elegant, cream-colored as promised, with practical lines that would allow Clara to move and work. But there was beauty in it too, delicate stitching at the collar, sleeves that fit perfectly, a silhouette that made Clara look less like a workhorse and more like a woman. You see, Mrs. Kowalski said with satisfaction, pretty is possible, even for giants. Clara looked at her reflection and barely recognized herself. This woman in the mirror stood tall instead of slouching, met eyes instead of avoiding them, looked ready for whatever came next instead of broken by what came before. It's perfect, Clara said softly. Thank you. Mrs. Kowalski waved off the gratitude. Is my job. Now take off before you wrinkle. Tomorrow you wear. Tomorrow you become wife. Tomorrow everything changes. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood at her window watching the ranch under moonlight, trying to commit every detail to memory. Because Mrs. Kowalski was right, tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow she would marry a man she barely knew. Tomorrow she would become part of an empire built on blood and lies. Tomorrow the war would begin in earnest, and she would have to choose who she wanted to be in it. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. The wedding day had arrived. Clara pressed her hand against the cool glass and made herself a promise. Whatever came next, whoever she had to become, she wouldn't run, wouldn't break, wouldn't fade back into invisibility. She would fight for this place, for this future, for herself. The moon climbed higher, casting silver light across the sleeping ranch, and Clara stood watch over her new world, preparing for the battle that tomorrow would bring. Dawn broke pale and cold over the ranch, the kind of morning that promised heat later but started with a bite. Clara had given up on sleep around 4 and spent the last hour watching the sky change colors through her window. Her wedding day. The words felt foreign, like a language she'd heard but never learned to speak. Ruth arrived exactly at 6, carrying a breakfast tray Clara hadn't asked for and wouldn't be able to eat. The older woman took one look at her face and set the tray aside. Nerves? Ruth asked. Terror. Good. Shows you're thinking clearly. Ruth moved to the wardrobe where the wedding dress hung like a ghost. Eat something anyway. You'll need your strength. The ceremony's at noon, but we've got 6 hours of preparation before that. 6 hours? Clara's voice cracked. To put on a dress? To transform you into a bride worthy of the cross name. Ruth's tone was matter-of-fact. Mrs. Kowalski will do your hair. I'll help with the dress, and you'll sit still and let us work, even if it kills you. Understood? Clara nodded mutely, picking at the bread on the tray. Her stomach rebelled against food, but she forced it down anyway. Ruth was right. She'd need strength for whatever this day would bring. By 7, Mrs. Kowalski had arrived with her arsenal of pins, brushes, and mysterious implements. She circled Clara like a general surveying a battlefield, muttering in Polish about impossible tasks and insufficient time. The hair, she announced. First, we conquer the hair. For 2 hours, Clara sat while Mrs. Kowalski worked magic with her unruly dark locks, brushing, pinning, twisting, securing. Ruth stood by, offering opinions that sounded more like commands. Clara's scalp ached from the pulling, but gradually something elegant emerged from the chaos, a style that was sophisticated without being fragile, beautiful without being impractical. There, Mrs. Kowalski said with satisfaction. Now she looks less like field hand, more like woman who runs empire. I don't run anything, Clara protested. Not yet. Ruth's smile was knowing. Give it time. The dress came next, a process that required both women's help and Clara's patience. The fabric whispered against her skin as they worked, adjusting seams and checking buttons. When they finally stepped back, Clara caught her reflection in the full-length mirror and went still. The woman staring back couldn't be her. This woman stood tall and proud, the cream dress highlighting the strength in her shoulders while softening her rough edges. Her dark hair framed a face that looked determined rather than defeated. Her eyes held steel instead of resignation. You see, Mrs. Kowalski said softly. Pretty was always there, just needed right frame. A knock at the door made all 3 women turn. Ruth opened it to reveal Dutch, the scarred ranch hand who'd ridden with Ethan to collect Clara what felt like a lifetime ago. He stood awkwardly in the hallway, hat in hands. Begging your pardon, ma'am, he addressed Ruth. But Mr. Victor wants to see the bride, says it's important. Ruth exchanged a look with Mrs. Kowalski. Now? 2 hours before the ceremony? Says it can't wait. Dutch shifted uncomfortably. He's in his room, asked if Miss Clara would come up. Clara's heart hammered. Victor rarely left his study these days, the pain too great for unnecessary movement. If he'd retreated to his bedroom and was summoning her there, something was wrong. I'll go, she said, moving toward the door. Not in the dress. Mrs. Kowalski's voice rose in horror. You wrinkle, you stain, you ruin everything. Then what? Ruth was already pulling a simple robe from the wardrobe. Put this over it, carefully, and whatever Victor wants, make it quick. We still have work to do. Clara wrapped the robe around herself and followed Dutch through the house. They climbed to the second floor, past her own room, toward the east wing where Victor's private quarters occupied half the space. She'd never been invited here before. No one had, except Ruth and the doctor who came weekly to check on the dying man. Dutch knocked once, then opened the door. "Miss Clara, sir." "Send her in, then leave us." Dutch stepped aside and Clara entered alone. Victor's bedroom was sparse despite its size. A massive bed dominated one wall. A desk sat by the window. Shelves held books and papers, but no decoration, no softness, nothing that spoke of comfort or sentiment. It was a room designed for a man who'd spent his life at war and never learned how to rest. Victor sat in a chair by the window, dressed despite the early hour, though his collar hung loose and his face was gray with pain. A whiskey bottle stood on the table beside him, half empty. He looked worse than he had 3 days ago, the cancer eating faster now, time running out. "Close the door," he said. Clara obeyed, then stood waiting. Victor studied her with those burning eyes, taking in the wedding preparations, the careful hair, the hint of cream fabric beneath her robe. "They made you presentable," he said finally. "Good. Appearances matter, even if the whole thing's a calculated arrangement." He gestured to a chair. "Sit. I won't bite. Not today, anyway." Clara sat, her spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Every instinct screamed that this conversation would be important, possibly dangerous. Victor reached for something on the table beside him, a wooden box, old and worn. He opened it and pulled out papers, setting them carefully on his lap. "These are the real records," he said quietly. "Not the ones we show the lawyers or the bank. The real ones. The truth about how this empire was built." His fingers trembled slightly as he touched the papers. "I told you before that I took what I needed. I wasn't lying. But I didn't tell you everything." Claire's throat went dry. "Why tell me now?" "Because in 2 hours, you'll be family. And because Ethan doesn't know all of it. Can't know. Not yet. He's too much like his mother was, too honest, too principled. He'd try to fix things that can't be fixed without destroying everything." Victor's eyes locked on hers. "But you're different. You understand that sometimes survival requires ugly choices." "What kind of choices?" Victor pulled out a map, spreading it across his lap. "See this section here? 3,000 acres along the northern border. Prime grazing land with year-round water access. The Brennan family claimed it first, had a valid deed going back 20 years. I wanted it. They wouldn't sell." He tapped the map. "So I found a judge who owed me favors, had the deed declared invalid on a technicality. Took the land while they were fighting it in court. By the time they lost, I'd already built fences and moved cattle in." "What happened to the Brennans?" "They left the territory. Broken. Ruined." Victor's voice held no remorse. "That land is now worth 10 times what I would have paid. It feeds our cattle through the winter. Without it, this ranch couldn't sustain its current size." Clara's stomach churned. "You're telling me this because the Brennans have a son, Michael. He was 12 when I took their land. He's in his 40s now, running a small operation 2 territories over, and he's never forgotten." Victor pulled out another paper. "He's been writing letters to other families I've wronged, building alliances, waiting for me to die so he can strike." "Strike how?" "Legal challenges to the land titles, demands for restitution, public campaigns to destroy the cross name." Victor's smile was bitter. "He's smart, patient. He won't use violence. That would make him the villain. Instead, he'll use the law, public opinion, political pressure. He'll tear this empire apart piece by piece, all perfectly legal." Clara's mind raced. "Does Ethan know?" "Ethan knows we have enemies. He doesn't know how many or how justified their anger is." Victor leaned forward, pain flashing across his face. "When I die, you'll find these papers in my desk. Hidden compartment, left side under the false bottom. You'll read them, all of them, and then you'll decide what to tell Ethan and what to bury." "Why me? Why not tell him yourself?" Because if I tell him, he'll feel obligated to make it right immediately. He'll try to give back what I took, pay restitution, atone for my sins. And that kind of wholesale dismantling will destroy everything, put hundreds of people out of work, crash the local economy, create chaos. Victor's voice dropped. But if you tell him after I'm gone, after you've had time to think, to plan, to strategize, maybe you can find a way to make things right without burning it all down. You're asking me to lie to my husband. I'm asking you to protect him. Protect all of us. Victor's eyes were desperate now, the mask slipping. I built this empire for him, so he'd have something his children could inherit, so the cross name would mean something. I made terrible choices doing it, but I can't unmake them. All I can do is try to hand him the tools to fix what I broke. Clara stood, needing to move, to think. She walked to the window and looked out over the ranch. Hundreds of acres spread before her, cattle grazing peacefully, cowboys working in the corrals. The whole vast machine humming along, built on foundations of theft and broken promises. What if I refuse? She asked quietly. What if I tell Ethan everything today before the wedding? Then you'll destroy him. Victor's voice was certain. He'll try to fix it immediately, and the enemies circling us will strike while we're weak. They'll take not just what I stole, but everything else too. Every acre we earned honestly, every improvement we made, they'll leave Ethan with nothing but ashes and regret. Maybe that's what he deserves. What you both deserve. Maybe. Victor's admission surprised her. But what about the ranch hands who've worked here for 20 years? What about their families? What about the town that depends on us for jobs, for trade, for stability? Do they deserve to suffer for my sins? Clara turned to face him. You're a bastard. Yes, I am. Victor didn't flinch. But I'm a bastard who's giving you the truth and the tools to handle it. That's more than most people get. He gestured to the papers. Take them, hide them. When I'm gone, when you're ready, read them. Then decide what kind of woman you want to be. Clara crossed the room and took the papers with shaking hands. They felt heavy, weighted with more than ink and parchment. These were confessions, leverage, weapons. Why do you trust me with this? She asked. Because you're a survivor. Because you understand that the world isn't black and white, right and wrong. It's all compromise and calculation and doing your best with what you've got. Victor's smile was tired. And because I see something in you that I saw in myself at your age, the willingness to do whatever it takes. I'm nothing like you. Not yet. But give it time. This place changes people, hardens them, turns them into whatever they need to be to survive. He reached for his whiskey. Now go, get married, start your life, and when the time comes, you'll know what to do with those papers. Clara left the room with the documents hidden beneath her robe, her heart pounding. Ruth waited in the hallway, concern etched on her face. What did he want? To give me a wedding present. Clara's voice sounded strange to her own ears. Where can I hide something? Somewhere no one will look? Ruth's eyes narrowed, but she didn't ask questions. Your room, behind the loose board under the bed, left side, near the wall. It's been there since the house was built. Clara went to her room and found the spot Ruth described. She pried up the board carefully and slid the papers into the darkness beneath. They disappeared like secrets into a grave. Then she replaced the board and stood, brushing dust from her hands. Mrs. Kowalski was waiting with barely controlled impatience. Finally, we have 1 hour. 1 hour to finish, and you disappear for secret meetings. She grabbed Clara's arm. Come, come. No time for standing around. The next hour passed in a blur of final adjustments and preparations. Mrs. Kowalski fussed over every detail while Ruth offered quiet encouragement. Clara moved through it mechanically, her mind still on the papers hidden beneath her floor, on the choice Victor had forced on her, on the lies she'd have to tell. At 11:30, a knock came at the door. Ruth opened it to reveal Ethan, dressed in a black suit that made him look even more imposing than usual. His hair was combed back, his jaw freshly shaved. He looked like a man going to war, not a wedding. His eyes found Clara, and something flickered in their icy depths. Not love, they barely knew each other, but recognition, respect, maybe the beginning of something that could become partnership if they were lucky. You look, he started, then stopped. Different, Is that good or bad? Clara asked. Neither, just true. He offered his arm. It's time. Clara took his arm, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric. Mrs. Kowalski made one last adjustment to her dress, then stepped back with a satisfied nod. Beautiful, the seamstress declared. Now go. Be married. Try not to trip. They descended the stairs together, Clara's hand light on Ethan's sleeve. The house was quiet, everyone already assembled wherever the ceremony would take place. Clara realized she didn't even know where they were getting married. No one had told her. Ethan led her through the house and out onto the wide back porch. Clara stopped, breath-catching. The entire ranch had gathered. Cowboys in their best clothes lined up in neat rows. The kitchen staff stood together, Maria dabbing at her eyes with her apron. Dutch and Murphy and dozens of other men she'd only seen from a distance. They'd set up chairs in a semicircle facing the porch, and every seat was filled. At the center, waiting on the porch, stood a minister Clara had never met, a weathered man with kind eyes who looked like he'd officiated 1,000 weddings in 1,000 impossible places. And beside him, leaning heavily on his cane but standing nevertheless, was Victor Cross. The dying man had come to see his son married, had dragged himself out of his sick room despite the pain, because this moment mattered more than comfort. He insisted, Ethan murmured. Said he'd crawl down here if he had to. They climbed the porch steps together. The assembled crowd fell silent. Clara could feel hundreds of eyes on her, judging, evaluating, wondering if she'd last longer than the last girl who'd tried and failed. The minister smiled warmly. Shall we begin? The ceremony was short, practical, nothing like the elaborate affairs Clara had heard about in books. No poetry, no lengthy speeches about love and devotion, just the essential words, the binding promises, the legal transformation from two individuals into something new. Do you, Ethan Cross, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward? I do. Ethan's voice was steady, certain. And do you, Clara Hale, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward? Clara looked at Ethan. At this man who'd chosen her for reasons that had nothing to do with romance. At this hard, honest, complicated person who'd offered her survival instead of pretty lies. At this stranger who would now be bound to her for better or worse. I do. The minister nodded. By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Ethan hesitated, clearly unsure of the protocol. This wasn't a marriage born of passion. They'd never even touched beyond professional courtesy. Clara made the decision for both of them. She leaned up and pressed a brief, chaste kiss to his lips. His mouth was warm, firm, and gone before she could process more than that. The assembled crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Cowboys whistled. Someone fired a gun into the air in celebration. The sound echoed across the ranch, a declaration to the world that the Cross family had a new member. Clara Cross. The name felt impossible. Victor stepped forward, moving slowly, each step visible agony. He reached them and placed one trembling hand on Ethan's shoulder, the other on Clara's. Your family now, he said, his voice carrying despite its roughness. That means something. It means loyalty. It means sacrifice. It means doing whatever it takes to protect what we've built. His eyes held Clara's. Welcome to the Cross name. May you wear it better than I did. Then he turned and made his painful way back into the house, refusing help, his pride demanding he walk alone even if it killed him. The celebration that followed was overwhelming. Tables had been set up in the yard, groaning under the weight of food Maria and the kitchen staff had prepared. Someone produced fiddles and guitars. Cowboys who looked like they'd never smiled in their lives were grinning and slapping Ethan on the back. Women Clara barely knew hugged her and offered congratulations mixed with advice. Don't let him walk all over you, one ranch wife whispered. Crossmen need a firm hand. Feed him well and he'll never stray, another offered. Make sure he knows who's really in charge, a third said with a wink. Clara smiled and nodded and tried to absorb it all. She was passed from person to person, welcomed and warned and evaluated. Through it all, she kept catching glimpses of Ethan across the crowd. He looked about as comfortable as she felt, which is to say, not at all. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Ruth appeared at Clara's elbow. Time to change. You can't spend the whole evening in your wedding dress. It needs to be preserved. Clara followed her back into the house gratefully, escaping the overwhelming attention. In her room, Ruth helped her out of the cream dress with gentle efficiency. "You did well," Ruth said quietly. "I know this wasn't the wedding you probably imagined as a girl. I never imagined a wedding at all." Clara pulled on a simpler dress, blue cotton, that was far more comfortable. "I never thought anyone would choose me." "Ethan chose well, even if he doesn't know it yet." Ruth gathered the wedding dress carefully. "This will go in storage. For your daughter someday, maybe." The word hung in the air. Daughter, children, the future that was now expected of her. Claire's hands went to her stomach instinctively. Somewhere in Victor's confession papers was surely mention of needing heirs, of continuing the bloodline, of making sure the Cross legacy had children to inherit it. "Ruth, Clara didn't even know what she wanted to ask. "It's all right to be scared," Ruth said. "It's all right to not have all the answers. You don't have to know everything today, you just have to survive today. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." A commotion outside made them both turn toward the window. Riders were approaching fast, dust rising behind them. 4 horses, pushing hard. Ruth's face went tight. "That's trouble. No one rides like that unless something's wrong." They hurried downstairs. By the time they reached the yard, Ethan was already striding toward the approaching riders. Dutch and Murphy flanked him, hands on their weapons. The celebration had stopped, everyone watching tensely. The lead rider pulled up hard, his horse lathered and blowing. Clara recognized him, one of the hands who worked the northern pastures, miles from the main ranch. "Mr. Cross," the man was breathing hard. "We got a situation, major situation." "Talk!" Ethan's voice was commander sharp. "Cattle. Someone cut the fence on the north border, drove off maybe 200 head. We tracked them as far as we could, but they're moving fast, headed toward Brennan territory." The name hit Clara like a fist. Brennan. The family Victor had destroyed. Michael Brennan, who'd been building alliances and waiting for his moment. Ethan's jaw tightened. "When?" "Had to be last night or early this morning. We just discovered it an hour ago." The rider's face was grim. "Sir, that's not all. They left a message, burned into a fence post." "What did it say?" "The debt comes due. That's all. Just those 4 words." Silence fell across the yard. The celebration was over. Everyone knew what this meant. Someone had made their move. While the ranch was distracted with a wedding, while guards were pulled in to attend the ceremony, someone had struck. Victor appeared in the doorway, his face pale, but his eyes burning. "Brennan, that bastard finally grew a spine." "We don't know it was him," Ethan started. "Of course it was him." Victor's voice cracked like a whip. 30 years he's been waiting, 30 years planning his revenge, and he chose your wedding day to announce himself. He looked at the assembled crowd. "Everyone who's working, arm up. We ride in 1 hour. We'll track those cattle and get them back, and we'll make an example." "No." Ethan's voice cut through his father's rage. "We don't know who took them. We don't know why. We're not riding out half-cocked and starting a war based on assumptions. They declared war when they stole our cattle." "They stole cattle. That's theft, not war, and we'll handle it through proper channels. We'll track them, identify who's responsible, and then decide how to respond." Ethan's eyes were ice cold. "We're not burning down half the territory because someone got bold." Father and son faced each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Everyone in the yard held their breath, waiting to see who would break first. Clara found herself moving forward before she'd consciously decided to. She walked through the crowd until she stood between Ethan and Victor, her wedding day dress replaced with practical cotton, her carefully styled hair already coming loose. "How many men do we have who can track?" she asked Ethan, her voice cutting through the tension. Ethan blinked, surprised. 6, maybe 8, good enough to follow a trail that's hours old. "Then send them, now, before the trail gets any colder." Clara turned to Victor. "And you need to tell us everything about Michael Brennan, what he's capable of, what he wants, what alliances he might have." She looked between them. "If this is the start of something bigger, we need information before we need weapons." Victor studied her with those burning eyes, and slowly, impossibly, he smiled. Listen to your wife, Ethan. She's got more sense than both of us. The moment broke. Ethan turned to Dutch. Get the best trackers. Take supplies for 3 days. Find those cattle and identify who took them. But no confrontation. Just information. Clear? Dutch nodded and started barking orders. Men scattered, the celebration forgotten, everyone moving into crisis mode with practiced efficiency. Clara stood in the center of the chaos, watching her new world reorganize around this threat. Her wedding day. The day that was supposed to mark a beginning had instead become something else entirely. The war Victor had warned about wasn't coming. It was already here. Ethan appeared at her side as the trackers prepared to ride out. That was good thinking, he said quietly. Keeping my father from doing something reckless. Keeping me from doing nothing. I just asked questions. You asked the right questions. He watched his men work. This is what it's going to be like. Crisis after crisis. Problems that need solving before they explode. You ready for that? Clara thought about the papers hidden under her floor, about Victor's confession and Brennan's revenge and the empire built on theft now facing the consequences, about the choice she'd been given to protect or to reveal, to defend or to dismantle. I don't think anyone's ever ready for war, she said, but I'm still here. Good. Ethan's hand found hers, rough calluses against rough calluses. Because I'm going to need you, not just today, but every day that comes after. His grip was strong, steady, honest. No promises of love or happiness. Just the truth of what they were facing together. Clara squeezed back. Then I guess we'd better figure out how to survive it. The sun set over the Cross Ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like fire. The celebration was over, the work was beginning, and Clara Cross stood beside her husband, watching the trackers ride north toward enemy territory, knowing that everything from this moment forward would be a test. But she'd passed every test so far, had survived her father's contempt, Victor's evaluation, the brutal learning curve of running an empire, had stood up when it mattered and refused to break when breaking would have been easier. The war was here. The enemies were circling, the foundations were cracking, but Clara wasn't running, wasn't hiding, wasn't fading into the background. She was standing her ground. And if the Cross Empire was going to burn, it would burn with her fighting to save it or transform it into something that could finally stand on honest ground. The night came down dark and full of promise. Promise of violence, change, revelation, struggle. All the things Clara had signed up for when she chose this life. All the things she was ready to face. Because she wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. She wasn't the field hand chosen for her strength. She wasn't even just a bride on her wedding day. She was Clara Cross, and the war had just begun. The trackers didn't return that night, or the next morning. By the second afternoon, tension on the ranch had wound so tight that Clara could feel it vibrating in the air like a plucked wire ready to snap. Men moved through their work with weapons close at hand. Conversations happened in low voices that cut off whenever she approached. And Ethan barely slept, spending hours in his father's study poring over maps and old records. Clara threw herself into the work because it was the only thing that made sense. The kitchen still needed managing, meals still needed preparing. The ranch still ran on schedules that didn't care about stolen cattle or brewing wars. She kneaded bread with more force than necessary. Imagining each punch of her fist into the dough was driving back the fear that threatened to swallow her whole. You keep hitting it like that. You'll toughen it beyond eating, Maria observed, watching Clara work. Then maybe it'll match everything else around here. Clara's hands didn't slow. Tough enough to survive whatever's coming. Maria wiped her hands on her apron and came to stand beside her. You're scared. That's good. Means you're smart. But being scared and being paralyzed aren't the same thing. One keeps you alive, the other gets you killed. Clara stopped kneading and looked at the older woman. How do you stand it? Living here, knowing that everything could explode at any moment? Because everywhere is like that if you look close enough. At least here, we face it honest instead of pretending the danger doesn't exist. Maria took the dough and shaped it with expert hands. When I first came to this ranch 20 years ago, Victor was fighting the Hendersons over water rights. Real fighting. Men died. I thought about running every single day for 3 months, but I stayed. You know why? Why? Because running doesn't make you safe. It just makes you alone when the danger finds you anyway. Maria set the shaped loaf aside. You're not alone here, Clara. Remember that. Before Clara could respond, Dutch appeared in the doorway, trail dust covering him head to toe. His face was grim. They're back? Clara asked. Just me. Rode ahead to report. Dutch pulled off his hat. Is Ethan in the house? Study, with his father. Clara wiped her hands. I'll take you. She led Dutch through the house, her heart hammering. Whatever news he brought, it wasn't good. She could read it in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Ethan and Victor both looked up as they entered. Ethan was on his feet immediately. What did you find? Dutch pulled a folded paper from his pocket. The cattle are 20 miles north, on a spread owned by Michael Brennan. We watched for 6 hours. They're mixed in with his herd, already wearing his brand over our mark. Professional job, someone who knows cattle. Victor's fist hit the desk. I knew it. That bastard finally made his move. We ride tonight. There's more. Dutch's voice cut through the rage. Brennan's expecting us. He's got 30 men, maybe more, all armed and ready. And he's got witnesses, a territorial marshal, 2 lawyers, and a land surveyor all staying at his ranch as guests. Everything documented, everything legal on paper. Legal? Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. He stole our cattle. He says he found them on his land. Says our fence was built on property that rightfully belongs to him based on an old survey from before Victor acquired the northern section. Dutch unfolded the paper. This is a copy of the deed he's claiming. Says it supersedes ours. Clara moved closer, reading over Ethan's shoulder. The document looked official, complete with signatures and seals. Her mind raced, connecting pieces. This wasn't about cattle. It was about the land itself. Brennan was challenging the theft that Victor had committed 30 years ago, using the stolen cattle as bait to draw them into a confrontation. It's a trap, she said quietly. All 3 men turned to look at her. He wants us to come in angry and violent, Claire continued, her voice gaining strength. With all those witnesses there, a marshal, lawyers. If we attack, we're the villains. He can claim self-defense, get our ranch seized by the territory, take back everything he lost and more. Victor's eyes narrowed. Smart girl. You're absolutely right. He looked at Dutch. What else? He sent this. Dutch pulled out another paper, this one a letter. Said to give it directly to Ethan Cross. Ethan took it and read aloud. To Ethan Cross. Your father stole my family's land 30 years ago through fraud and corruption. He destroyed my parents, drove us from our home, and built his empire on our ruin. I'm giving you one chance to make this right. Return the northern section to its rightful owners, pay restitution for 30 years of stolen profits, and publicly acknowledge what was done. Do this, and I'll return your cattle, and we can settle the rest through proper legal channels. Refuse, and I'll use every resource at my disposal to destroy everything Victor Cross built. You have 1 week to decide. Michael Brennan. Silence filled the study. Clara watched the color drain from Ethan's face as he processed what this meant. Not just a fight over cattle, a full legal assault on the legitimacy of their holdings. 1 week, Victor said flatly. The arrogant bastard gives us 1 week to dismantle 30 years of work. He's not wrong, though, is he? Ethan's voice was quiet but sharp as broken glass. You did steal that land. You told me the deed was questionable but necessary. You never said you committed outright fraud. Fraud is what the losers call strategy when they're too weak to fight back. Victor struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on his cane. I did what I had to do to survive, to build something that would last. That land was wasted on the Brennans. They didn't have the vision or the strength to make it productive. That doesn't make it yours. Ethan's control was fracturing. You lied to the courts, bribed officials, destroyed a family, and now their son is coming for payback, and we don't have a moral leg to stand on. Moral legs don't matter. Legal ones do. And legally, that land has been ours for 3 decades. Possession, improvement, continuous use, all of that counts. Victor's eyes burned. You give in to Brennan, you set a precedent. Every claim we've made, every acre we've fought for, all of it becomes questionable. This empire will collapse under 1,000 challenges. Claire's mind was racing. This was exactly what Victor had warned her about. The ugly foundations cracking under scrutiny. The choice between protecting what they had and making things right. And Ethan, caught in the middle, his principles at war with his inheritance. What if we offer a compromise, Claire heard herself say. Both men turned to her. Dutch stood silently by the door, watching everything. What kind of compromise? Ethan asked. Clara took a breath, thinking fast. The northern section is 3,000 acres. What if we offer to sell it back to Brennan at a fair price? Not give it away. That sets the precedent Victor's worried about. But sell it honestly at market value. Use that money to pay partial restitution for the years of lost profit. That's still admitting guilt, Victor growled. It's admitting the situation is complicated, that old claims have some merit and deserve consideration. Claire looked at Ethan. You want to run this ranch differently than your father. This is your chance to prove it, not by giving in completely, but by finding a middle path, justice without destruction. Ethan studied her, something shifting in his expression. And the cattle? He returns them as part of the negotiation. We drop any criminal charges. Everyone walks away with something. Clara turned to Victor. It's not perfect. It's not what you wanted. But it might be enough to stop this war before it really starts. Victor laughed, that rough cough laugh that held no humor. You think Brennan will accept that? After 30 years of waiting for revenge? I think he might, because what he really wants isn't just the land. It's acknowledgement, recognition that what happened to his family was wrong. Clara held Victor's burning gaze. Give him that, and you might rob him of his moral authority. Make him look petty if he keeps pushing for more. Silence fell again. Ethan paced to the window, staring out at the ranch. Dutch shifted uncomfortably. Victor sank back into his chair, exhausted. It could work, Ethan said finally. It's risky, but it could work. Dutch, can you get a message to Brennan? Tell him we want to meet. Neutral ground, just talking, no weapons. The old trading post at Copper Creek, Dutch suggested. Halfway between our spreads, public enough that no one can pull anything without witnesses. Make it happen. 3 days from now. Give me time to prepare. Ethan looked at his father. I'm doing this, with or without your blessing. Victor studied his son for a long moment. You're making a mistake, showing weakness. But you're the one who has to live with the consequences after I'm gone. He pushed himself upright. Do what you think is right. Just don't say I didn't warn you when it all falls apart. He left the study, each step labored, his cane tapping against the floor like a countdown to something inevitable. After he was gone, Ethan turned to Clara. That was risky. Contradicting him in front of others. Was I wrong? No, you were exactly right. That's what scares me. Ethan moved closer. You've been here less than a week, and you're already navigating family politics better than I do. I'm just trying to survive, same as everyone else. Clara felt the weight of the hidden papers under her floor. All those other secrets Victor had confessed. All the other compromises she'd eventually have to face. Do you think it'll work? The compromise? Honestly, I don't know. But it's better than the alternatives. Better than war. Better than surrender. Ethan's hand found her shoulder, a brief touch that held surprising warmth. Thank you for speaking up, for not being afraid to challenge both of us when we were headed in the wrong direction. Dutch cleared his throat. I'll ride out within the hour. Get that message delivered. He looked at Clara. Ma'am? Your instincts were good, real good. Keep trusting them. After he left, Clara and Ethan stood alone in the study. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, painting everything gold. For a moment, they were just two people trying to figure out an impossible situation, not strangers bound by legal ceremony and family obligation. Can I ask you something? Clara said quietly. Anything. Do you resent me for being here, for being part of all this mess? Ethan considered the question seriously. No, if anything, I'm grateful. You see things I miss. Ask questions I wouldn't think to ask. You're not blinded by loyalty to my father or hatred of his methods. You're just honest. He paused. I know this isn't the life you imagined. Hell, it's not the life I imagined either, but maybe we can make something decent out of it anyway. Maybe. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Not love. They weren't there yet, might never be there. But partnership, understanding, the beginning of trust. The next 3 days were a controlled chaos of preparation. Ethan spent hours crafting the proposal to present to Brennan, calculating fair prices, researching precedents for similar settlements. Clara worked with Ruth to keep the household running smoothly while half the men were on high alert. And Victor stayed in his room, drinking too much and saying nothing, his silence more ominous than his rage. The night before the meeting, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood at her window watching the ranch under moonlight, thinking about the papers hidden beneath her floor. She should read them, should know what other secrets Victor was keeping, but part of her was terrified of what she'd find. A soft knock at her door made her turn. "Come in." Ethan entered, looking as exhausted as she felt. Couldn't sleep either. Too much thinking. Same. He crossed to stand beside her at the window. "Tomorrow changes everything, one way or another. Are you ready?" "No, but I'm going anyway." He glanced at her. "Will you come with me? To the meeting?" Claire's breath caught. "Why?" "Because Brennan's anger is at my father, not you. Because having a woman there might keep things from getting violent. And because," he trailed off, searching for words, "because I trust your judgment, and I might need someone to stop me if I'm about to do something stupid." "You're asking me to be your conscience?" "I'm asking you to be my partner. In this. In all of it." Ethan's voice was rough with something that might have been vulnerability. "I know we barely know each other. I know this marriage was a transaction, not a romance. But we're in this together now, and I'd rather face tomorrow with you beside me than alone." Clara looked at this man she'd married less than a week ago. This stranger who was slowly becoming less strange, who trusted her enough to show uncertainty, who asked for help instead of demanding obedience. "I'll come," she said. "But if this goes wrong," "If it goes wrong, we'll figure it out together." Ethan's hand found hers in the darkness. "That's the deal, right? Whatever comes, we face it together." "That's the deal." They stood at the window for a long time, hands clasped, watching the stars wheel overhead. Two people bound by circumstances, trying to forge something real from a foundation of necessity. It wasn't the story Clara had imagined as a girl, but it was honest, and maybe that was worth more than any pretty lie. Dawn came cold and clear. Clara dressed in practical clothes, sturdy riding skirt, work shirt, boots that could handle rough ground. She braided her hair tight and checked her reflection. The woman looking back was harder than she'd been a week ago, more certain, less afraid. Ethan was waiting in the yard with 3 horses. Dutch would accompany them as protection and witness. The rest of the ranch watched them prepare to ride out, tension evident in every face. Victor appeared on his porch, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked worse than Clara had ever seen him, the cancer eating faster now. But his eyes were clear as he called out, "Ethan!" Ethan turned. "Father? Don't give away more than you have to. And remember, mercy is weakness if they mistake it for fear." Victor's voice carried across the yard. "But if you believe this is the right path, then walk it without looking back. Second-guessing yourself is what gets you killed." It was as close to a blessing as Victor Cross was capable of giving. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, 3 riders heading north toward Copper Creek and whatever waited there. The journey took 2 hours, the landscape gradually changing from cross territory into neutral ground. Clara used the time to steady her nerves, rehearsing possible scenarios in her mind. The old trading post sat at the confluence of 2 streams, a weathered building that had seen better days. 3 horses were already tied outside. As they approached, Clara could see men waiting on the porch. Michael Brennan was easy to identify. He stood in the center, a man in his early 40s with iron gray hair and eyes that burned with the same intensity as Victor's. The years hadn't been kind. His face was weathered, his frame lean from hard work and harder living. But he carried himself with dignity, with purpose. 2 other men flanked him, both armed, both watching the approaching riders with wary eyes. Ethan dismounted first, then helped Clara down. Dutch stayed with the horses, hand near his weapon, but not threatening. "Brennan," Ethan said, his voice neutral. "Cross." Brennan's eyes swept over them, lingering on Clara. "You brought your wife. Interesting choice." This concerns the future of the ranch. She's part of that future. Ethan gestured to the building. Can we talk inside? Just the four of us. Leave the guns outside. Brennan considered this, then nodded. He told his men to wait, as Ethan told Dutch the same. The four of them entered the old trading post, leaving their weapons by the door. Inside, dust motes danced in the light streaming through cracked windows. An old table sat in the center. They gathered around it like negotiators in some ancient treaty. You got my message, Brennan said. You here to accept my terms? I'm here to offer a compromise. Ethan pulled out papers. The northern section, I'm prepared to sell it back to you at current market value. 3,000 acres at $12 per acre, $36,000. Brennan laughed, bitter and sharp. You want me to buy back land you stole from my family? Land that cost my father everything he had? I want to acknowledge that the original claim was questionable, that your family was wronged, but simply handing it over sets a precedent that could destroy not just our ranch, but the entire territorial economy. Ethan's voice was steady. This way, you get your land back, you get compensation, and we both move forward instead of destroying each other. Compensation? Brennan's face twisted. My mother died of heartbreak within a year of losing that land. My father drank himself to death 5 years later. Your father destroyed my family, and you think money makes that right? Clara spoke up before Ethan could respond. No, money doesn't make it right. Nothing can undo what happened, but continuing the cycle of destruction doesn't honor your parents' memory. It just creates more victims. Brennan's eyes fixed on her. Easy to say when you're wearing the crown stolen from my family. I'm wearing work clothes and riding boots, same as you. I didn't choose the sins of the past any more than you did. Clara held his gaze. But we can choose what happens next. We can choose to build something better than what came before. Or we can burn it all down and leave nothing but ashes for the next generation. The next generation. Brennan's voice was hollow. I have a son, 14 years old. You know what I've been teaching him? That the Cross family are thieves and liars. That Victor Cross destroyed us and got away with it. That when I die, he should continue the fight. He looked at Ethan. Is that what you want? This feud lasting another 30 years? Another generation growing up with hatred instead of hope? No, Ethan said quietly. I don't want that. I want to break the cycle. I want to run this ranch honestly, build something that doesn't require lies to sustain it. But I can't do that if you destroy us before I get the chance. Brennan was silent for a long moment. His hands, calloused and scarred like Clara's, gripped the edge of the table. If I accept this, he finally said, it's not forgiveness. It's not reconciliation. It's just stopping the bleeding before we both die from it. That's all I'm asking for. Ethan pushed the papers across the table. Read it over. Think about it. You have witnesses and lawyers staying at your ranch. Have them review it. If the terms are fair, if it's a genuine offer, then maybe we can end this without more blood. Brennan took the papers but didn't look at them. And Victor? He agreed to this? My father is dying. In 6 months, maybe less, he'll be gone. And when he is, I'll be running this ranch my way. This is the first step. Ethan's voice was firm. I can't undo what he did. I can't bring back your parents or give you back the years you lost. But I can try to make the future different than the past. Clara watched Brennan's face, saw the war raging behind his eyes, rage versus reason, justice versus practicality, the satisfaction of destruction versus the hope of something better. I'll review it, Brennan said finally. Have my lawyers look it over. If it's genuine, if the numbers are fair, I'll consider it. He stood. But understand, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for my son, so he can inherit land instead of a vendetta. That's all I'm asking. Ethan stood as well, offering his hand. Brennan stared at it for a long moment, then took it. The handshake was brief, firm, holding no warmth but carrying the weight of possibility. They walked out together. Brennan mounted his horse and turned back one last time. The cattle. I'll return them within the week, regardless of how this negotiation goes. They were never the point, just bait to get your attention. I know, Ethan said. Brennan nodded once, then rode away with his men, dust rising behind them. Clara, Ethan, and Dutch stood watching them go. The sun had climbed to its zenith, heat bearing down merciless and bright. "You think he'll accept?" Dutch asked. "I think he'll seriously consider it. That's more than I hoped for." Ethan turned to Clara. "Thank you. What you said about breaking the cycle, that landed. It was true. That's why it landed." Clara moved to her horse. "Now we just have to hope he makes the right choice." They rode back toward the Cross Ranch, the landscape shimmering in the heat. Clara felt the weight of what they'd just done settling over her. This wasn't victory. It wasn't even peace. It was just the possibility of something other than war. But in this harsh world where survival meant constant struggle, possibility was worth fighting for. When they arrived back at the ranch, Victor was waiting on the porch. His face was unreadable as they dismounted and approached. "Well?" he demanded. "He's considering it. Going to have his lawyers review the offer." Ethan met his father's gaze squarely. It went as well as it could have. Victor studied them both, then nodded slowly. "Better than I expected. Maybe worse than I feared." He turned and made his painful way back inside, leaving them with that cryptic assessment. Ruth appeared with water and sandwiches. "How was it really?" "Terrifying," Clara admitted. "But honest, maybe that's enough." The next 5 days were an agony of waiting. The ranch hummed with nervous energy. Men worked their usual tasks, but kept weapons close. Everyone knew that Brennan's decision would determine the future of everything they'd built. Clara kept herself busy, but her mind was never far from the negotiation. She caught Ethan staring at nothing, clearly running through scenarios. Victor grew weaker, spending more time in his room, the cancer consuming him faster now. On the 6th day, a rider approached carrying Brennan's response. Ethan read it aloud in his father's study, Clara and Ruth present as witnesses. "I've had 3 lawyers review your offer. They confirm its fair market value. The terms are reasonable. My son asked me what I wanted more, the land or the vendetta. I chose the land. We have a deal. The cattle will be returned tomorrow. Deed transfer can proceed through proper legal channels. Michael Brennan." Silence filled the study. Then Victor started laughing, that rough cough laugh that shook his whole frame. "The bastard took it. The bastard actually took it. You did it, boy. You ended a 30-year war without firing a shot." Ethan sank into a chair, relief evident in every line of his body. "It's done. Really done. One war ended," Victor corrected. "But there'll be others. Always others. That's the price of empire." He looked at Clara. "You spoke well at that meeting. Brennan's letter mentioned it. Said your words about breaking cycles made him think. Made him remember his son." His smile was sharp. "You're learning fast. That's good. You'll need to." Clara felt the weight of his approval, knowing what it cost him to admit she'd been right. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This was the easy one. The next challenges won't be solved with compromise and pretty speeches." Victor struggled to his feet. "But today you both did good. Real good." He made his way to the door, then paused. "Clara? A word. Alone." Ethan and Ruth left, exchanging glances. When they were gone, Victor closed the door and fixed Clara with those burning eyes. "The papers I gave you, have you read them yet?" Clara's heart hammered. "No." "Good. Don't. Not yet." Victor moved closer. "What you did with Brennan, finding the middle path, the compromise that nobody loses completely, that's going to be your weapon going forward. The problems in those papers, they're bigger than Brennan, messier. But the same principle applies. Find the path that fixes things without destroying everything." He gripped her shoulder with surprising strength. "I'm dying faster than the doctors thought. Maybe weeks now, not months. When I'm gone, you'll read those papers, and then you'll decide how much truth Ethan can handle and when he can handle it. Trust your instincts. They're good." "Why me?" Clara asked. "Why not just tell him everything yourself?" "Because he loves me despite everything. That love makes him blind to how to fix what I broke without hating me for breaking it." Victor's voice was raw. "But you don't love me. You see me clear, and that clarity is what he's going to need." He released her shoulder. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for. Stronger than that first girl." Maybe strong enough to save this empire I built on sand. He left before Clara could respond, his cane tapping away into silence. Clara stood alone in the study, Victor's words echoing in her mind. She thought about the papers hidden under her floor, about the secrets still waiting, about the responsibility being placed on her shoulders to judge when and how to reveal the truth. But she also thought about what they'd just accomplished. A war ended through honesty and compromise. The enemy turned into a wary partner. A future opened that had seemed impossible days ago. Maybe Victor was right. Maybe she was strong enough for this. For all of it. For the battles still coming and the choices still waiting. Clara walked out into the afternoon sun, where Ethan stood talking with Dutch and several other hands. He saw her and smiled, a real smile, not the careful control he usually wore. "We did it," he said, pulling her into a brief, surprising hug. "We actually did it." Clara hugged him back, feeling the solid reality of him. Her husband, her partner, the man she was building a life with one impossible day at a time. "We did," she agreed, "and we'll do it again. Whatever comes next." Because the war wasn't over. Victor had been right about that. There would be other challenges, other enemies, other ugly truths crawling out from the Empire's foundation. But Clara Cross wasn't afraid anymore. She'd faced down a 30-year vendetta and found a way through it. She'd earned her place at this table, in this fight, beside this man. The future was uncertain. The past was unforgiving. The present was demanding. But Clara was ready, for all of it, whatever it took. Victor Cross died 3 weeks later on a Tuesday morning when the sun came up red as blood over the Montana horizon. Clara was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when Ruth appeared in the doorway, her face pale and set. "He's gone," was all she said. The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara's hand stilled on the dough she'd been kneading. Around her, the kitchen fell silent. Maria crossed herself. Beth started crying quietly. Susan just stood frozen, a knife in her hand and tears streaming down her weathered face. "Does Ethan know?" Clara asked, her voice sounding strange and distant. "He was with him at the end. Hasn't left the room." Ruth's eyes were dry but haunted. 20 years I worked for that man. He was hard and cruel and brilliant and impossible, and now he's just gone. Clara wiped her hands and walked through the house toward Victor's room. The hallway seemed longer than usual, each step carrying weight. She could hear voices ahead, the doctor's low murmur, other sounds she couldn't identify. The door stood open. Victor lay in his bed, finally still after months of fighting. Death had smoothed the pain from his face, leaving behind something almost peaceful. Almost. Ethan sat beside the bed, holding his father's hand. He looked up as Clara entered, and she saw everything in his eyes: grief, relief, fear, exhaustion. The complicated tangle of emotions that came from losing someone who'd been both anchor and albatross. "He went quietly," Ethan said. Opened his eyes, looked at me, said, "Don't let them destroy it," and then just stopped breathing. Clara moved to his side, placing her hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" Ethan's voice held no accusation, just honest curiosity. "You barely knew him, and what you did know wasn't exactly lovable. I'm sorry you lost your father. Even complicated fathers leave holes when they're gone." Clara squeezed his shoulder. "What do you need?" "I don't know." Ethan stood, still holding Victor's hand. "I should feel something more, shouldn't I? Sadness, loss. But all I feel is tired and scared of what comes next. What comes next is we bury him, we mourn him, and then we figure out how to run this ranch without him." Clara's voice was steady, even as her heart raced, because she knew what really came next. The papers hidden under her floor, the secrets Victor had made her promise to handle carefully. The funeral was held 2 days later. It seemed like half the territory showed up, some to pay respects, others to make sure Victor Cross was really dead. Enemies and allies stood side by side in uneasy truce, while the minister spoke words about eternal rest that seemed absurd, applied to a man who'd fought every moment of his life. Michael Brennan came, standing at the back with his hat in his hands. He caught Clara's eye once and nodded. Acknowledgement, not sympathy. The war between their families was over, but the peace was still too new for anything warmer. They buried Victor on a hill overlooking the ranch he'd built, a simple marker stating his name and years. No elaborate epitaphs. Victor would have hated flowery words anyway. After everyone left, after the house fell quiet and the ranch resumed its rhythm, Clara finally allowed herself to think about the papers. She'd managed to avoid them for 3 weeks, convincing herself she had time. But Victor's final words to Ethan echoed in her mind. Don't let them destroy it. That night, while Ethan dealt with lawyers and paperwork in the study, Clara retrieved the hidden documents. She sat on her bed with them spread before her, an oil lamp casting flickering shadows, and began to read. The first few pages confirmed what Victor had already told her, the Brennan land theft, complete with details about the bribed judge and forged surveys. But that was just the beginning. Water rights purchased through intimidation. 3 ranchers driven off their claims when they wouldn't sell. A partnership dissolved when Victor's business partner mysteriously disappeared, declared dead after 2 years, his share of the ranch quietly absorbed. Debts called in at strategic moments to force sales. Witnesses who changed their testimony after receiving midnight visits. Page after page of calculated cruelty, each decision defended in Victor's precise handwriting with cold logic. This was necessary. That was survival. Everything justified by the empire he was building. But worse than the crimes themselves were the ongoing complications. Land titles that could be challenged. Water agreements built on threats that could collapse under scrutiny. Partners' heirs who might discover the truth about their father's deaths. A web of corruption so intricate that pulling one thread could unravel everything. Clara read until her eyes burned and her head pounded. Then she read it all again, taking notes, understanding the full scope of what Victor had left them. He'd been right. Revealing all of this to Ethan at once would destroy him, would force him to choose between his principles and the livelihoods of hundreds of people who depended on the ranch, would turn him into either a martyr who sacrificed everything for honesty or a hypocrite who knowingly benefited from theft. But keeping it all hidden meant living with lies, meant building their future on foundations Clara now knew were rotten. She heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly gathered the papers. Ethan knocked softly before entering. "You're still awake," he said. "Couldn't sleep." Clara slid the papers under her pillow. "How are you holding up?" "The lawyers say the will is straightforward. Everything goes to me, no complications. The ranch is mine." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Mine to run, mine to protect, mine to potentially destroy with one wrong decision. "You won't destroy it." "How do you know?" Ethan looked at her. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if I make the wrong choices? My father built all this, and I could lose it through incompetence or idealism or just plain bad luck." Clara took his hand. "Your father built an empire on fear and force. You're going to build something better, something that doesn't require lies to hold it together. That's harder. That takes more strength, not less. And if it falls apart anyway, then we'll rebuild, together." Clara meant it. Despite everything she'd just read, despite knowing the poison roots of this empire, she believed in what Ethan wanted to create. Believed they could transform something corrupt into something honest. But it would require strategy, timing, the careful revelation of truths in ways that allowed for healing rather than destruction. Ethan squeezed her hand. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm grateful you're here." After he left, Clara retrieved the papers and read through them one final time. Then she made her decision. She would tell Ethan the truth, but not all at once, not in a way that forced impossible choices. Instead, she'd address each problem as it arose, giving him the information he needed when he needed it, building trust and partnership while slowly transforming the ranch's foundation from corruption to honesty. It wasn't perfect. It meant more lies in the short term, but it might save everything in the long run. The first test came 3 weeks after the funeral. A lawyer arrived from Denver representing the estate of James Hutchinson, Victor's former business partner who disappeared 25 years ago. The man's grandson had discovered old documents suggesting foul play in his grandfather's death and wanted the partnership agreement investigated. Ethan was ready to cooperate fully, open every record, prove they had nothing to hide. Clara knew from Victor's papers that full transparency would reveal everything, the threatened partner, the convenient disappearance, the questionable death declaration. Before we do that, Clara said carefully, let me look at what we have. Make sure we understand the full situation. She spent 2 days going through records, finding the evidence of Victor's intimidation buried in ledgers and correspondence. Then she went to Ethan with a proposal. The grandson has a legitimate grievance. His grandfather was pushed out unfairly, but the ranch was legally transferred before the disappearance. That part was done properly, if not ethically. Clara spread the documents on Ethan's desk. We can fight this in court, drag it out for years, spend a fortune on lawyers. Or we can offer a settlement. Pay the grandson what his grandfather's share would be worth today, acknowledge the partnership was dissolved unfairly, and move forward. That's a lot of money, Ethan said, studying the numbers. It's justice. Expensive justice, but justice nonetheless. Clara met his eyes. Your father wronged this family. You have the chance to make it right. Isn't that what you wanted? To run this place differently? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. You think we should just pay them off? Admit guilt? I think we should acknowledge past wrongs and compensate fairly. That's not the same as admitting criminal guilt. We don't have proof of what actually happened to James Hutchinson, but we can acknowledge the business dealings were questionable and make financial amends. And if word gets out, if it encourages others to come forward with claims, then we handle each one honestly. Some will be legitimate, some won't, but we evaluate them fairly and make decisions we can live with. Clara's voice was steady. This is what transforming the ranch looks like. It's not dramatic. It's not quick. It's just one honest decision after another until the foundation is solid. Ethan studied her face, seeing something there that made him nod slowly. All right, draft the settlement offer. Let's see if they'll accept it. They did. The Hutchinson grandson took the money and closed the case, publicly stating that while questions remained about his grandfather's death, the Cross family had acted honorably in settling the business dispute. It was the first crack in Victor's wall of secrets, handled carefully enough that it didn't bring the whole structure down. More challenges came throughout that first year. A water rights dispute that Clara helped negotiate to everyone's benefit. A land boundary disagreement that Ethan settled through honest surveying instead of intimidation. Each problem addressed with transparency and fairness, slowly rebuilding the ranch's reputation from feared to respected. And through it all, Clara carefully managed the flow of information, telling Ethan enough truth to guide his decisions without overwhelming him with the full scope of Victor's sins. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant vigilance. 6 months after Victor's death, Brennan visited the ranch, not as an enemy, but as a neighbor checking on mutual concerns about drought conditions. He and Ethan talked for hours about water management, shared resources, coordinated planning. Clara watched them from the porch. These two men whose families had been enemies for 30 years, now working together. It wasn't friendship, too much history for that, but it was cooperation, partnership, the beginning of something better. You're doing, Ruth said, appearing beside her. Ethan's doing. He's the one making the hard choices. But you're the one helping him see which choices need making. Ruth's eyes were knowing. Victor told me he gave you something. Information about the ranch's history. I don't know what it said, but I know it wasn't pretty. Clara didn't confirm or deny. Whatever it was, it's being handled. Good. Because this place needs both of you, Ethan's principles and your pragmatism. Together, you might actually pull off what Victor never could, building something that lasts without requiring constant violence to sustain it. That night, Clara went through the papers again. She'd addressed maybe half the issues Victor had documented. The other half would take years, patient work, careful negotiations, gradual transformation. But it was possible. She could see the path forward now. The second test came in the form of Clara's family. Catherine and Margaret arrived unannounced on a cold November afternoon, driving a wagon that had seen better days. Clara was in the yard when they pulled up, and her first instinct was to turn and walk away, to pretend she hadn't seen them. But she was Clara Cross now, not the invisible daughter. She stood her ground. Catherine looked worse than when Clara had left. Thinner, her beauty dimmed by hardship and disappointment. Margaret had aged years and months, her face pinched with desperation. Clara, Margaret's voice held forced warmth. Look at you. living in luxury while your family suffers. What do you want? Clara's tone was flat. Is that any way to greet your mother and sister? Margaret climbed down from the wagon with difficulty. We've come to visit, to see how you're doing, to reconnect. You disowned me, told me I was dead to you. We were upset. You can't hold that against us. Margaret looked around the ranch with naked envy. You've done well for yourself, married into wealth, living in this palace while your father loses everything. Clara felt old anger stirring but kept her voice level. Where is my father? Catherine finally spoke, her voice small. Gone. He lost the ranch 6 weeks ago. The bank foreclosed. He took what money was left and disappeared. Left us with nothing. So you came here looking for charity? We came here looking for family. Margaret's mask cracked. You're my daughter. You owe us support. I owe you nothing. Clara's words were cold as winter ice. You made it very clear what I was worth to you. A disappointment. A burden. Someone to hide when important people visited. That's not fair. It's absolutely fair. You sold Catherine like livestock and were furious when the buyer chose me instead. You never wanted me. You just want my money now that you're desperate. Ethan emerged from the barn, alerted by the raised voices. He took in the situation with a glance and moved to Clara's side. Problem? These are my stepmother and sister. They were just leaving. Margaret's eyes widened, seeing Ethan. Mr. Cross, what a pleasure to finally meet you properly. I'm sure Clara's told you all about us. We're so close, such a loving family. Clara told me you disowned her the day we married, Ethan said quietly. So I'm curious what brings you here now. The naked contempt in his voice made Margaret take a step back. Catherine started crying, those same theatrical sobs Clara remembered from childhood. Please, Catherine whispered. We have nowhere else to go. Father left us with nothing. We'll starve. Clara looked at her sister, this beautiful, useless girl who'd been raised to be ornamental and nothing more. She felt pity mixed with anger. Catherine was a victim of their father's choices as much as Clara had been, just a different kind of victim. There's a boarding house in town, Clara said. Mrs. Chen runs it. She employs women who need work, cleaning, cooking, mending. It's honest labor for honest pay. She pulled money from her pocket. This will cover 2 months' room and board. After that, you'll need to support yourselves. Support ourselves? Margaret's voice rose in outrage. We're not servants. We're your family. No, you made it clear I'm not your family, but I'm not cruel enough to let you starve. Clara pressed the money into Catherine's hand. Take it or leave it, but this is the only help you'll get from me. Catherine took the money with shaking hands. Thank you, she whispered. I'm sorry for everything. You deserved better than we gave you. It wasn't much. It didn't undo years of casual cruelty and deliberate dismissal, but it was honest, and Clara heard the truth in her sister's voice. Margaret huffed and protested and made threats about going to the territorial authorities. But she took the money too because desperation trumped pride. They left as the sun was setting, their wagon rattling back toward town. Clara watched them go, feeling something inside her finally settle. The old wounds weren't healed, maybe they never would be, but they'd stopped bleeding. You were generous, Ethan said. I was practical. If I'd turned them away completely, they'd have kept coming back or caused problems out of spite. This way, they have a chance to build new lives. Whether they take it is up to them. And if they squander it and come back asking for more, then I'll say no, but at least I'll know I gave them a fair chance. Clara leaned against him. I'm not my father. I won't abandon family completely, but I'm also not the doormat I used to be. They get one chance. What they do with it is their choice. Ethan's arm came around her shoulders. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between kneading bread and negotiating with angry ranchers. Clara smiled. Still learning, though. Every day. The winter was harsh that year, testing everyone's resolve. Cattle died despite their best efforts. Supply lines froze. Men got sick. The ranch that had seemed invincible under Victor's iron rule proved vulnerable under Ethan's gentler management. But they survived. Made it through to spring through hard work and cooperation and the goodwill they'd been building with neighboring ranches. When the Brennan Ranch lost their barn to fire, Cross Ranch hands helped rebuild it. When Cross cattle broke through a fence onto the Henderson property, the Hendersons helped round them up instead of demanding payment. Slowly, impossibly, the territory was healing from decades of Victor Cross's scorched earth tactics. Clara celebrated her first anniversary married to Ethan on a mild spring day that promised warmth after months of cold. They had dinner alone for the first time in weeks, just the two of them in the formal dining room that rarely got used. 1 year, Ethan said, raising his glass. I know it hasn't been what you imagined. It's been better. Clara meant it. Harder, yes, but better, more honest. Do you regret it? Saying yes to a stranger? Leaving your family? Clara thought about the question seriously. No, I regret the circumstances that made it necessary. I regret that my father was the kind of man who'd sell his daughter. But I don't regret the choice I made. This life, this partnership, it's the first real thing I've ever had. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. I chose you because I thought you could survive. But you've done more than survive. You've transformed this place, made it better, made me better. We made each other better. That's what partnership means. I love you. The words came out simple and honest. I don't know when it happened, somewhere between that first day and now. But I love you, Clara Cross. Clara's breath caught. They'd never spoken about love, had built their marriage on respect and honesty and shared purpose. But hearing the words now, she realized she felt the same. I love you too, she said. Even though you chose me because I looked like I could work like an ox. Ethan laughed, real and warm. Best decision I ever made. That night, lying in bed with her husband sleeping beside her, Clara retrieved the papers one final time. She'd addressed most of the major issues now. The remaining problems were smaller, manageable over time. The empire Victor had built on blood and lies was slowly transforming into something that could stand on honest foundations. She took the papers downstairs to the study fireplace and fed them to the flames one by one, watching 30 years of secrets turn to ash. Some of Victor's sins would never be fully addressed. The bodies were buried too deep, the trails too cold, but the living could be compensated. The ongoing corruption could be stopped. The future could be different than the past. When the last page caught fire, Clara felt something lift from her shoulders. The burden Victor had placed on her was gone. What remained was just the work itself, the daily effort of running a ranch honestly, treating people fairly, building something worth inheriting. She returned to bed and curled against Ethan's warmth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, always did, but they'd face them together, as partners, building a legacy that didn't require lies to sustain it. 2 years after Victor's death, Clara stood on the hill overlooking the ranch with Ruth beside her. Down below, cowboys worked cattle in the corrals. Smoke rose from the cookhouse. Children played between buildings. The whole vast machine hummed with organized purpose. He'd be proud, you know, Ruth said quietly. Victor, of what you've both built. I'm not sure about that. We've undone a lot of what he fought to create. No, you've refined it, taken the good parts and discarded the rot. That's what he wanted, even if he didn't know how to say it. Ruth gestured to the ranch below. This is what he tried to build, a legacy that would last. He just went about it the wrong way. You and Ethan are fixing his mistakes while preserving his dream. That's the greatest tribute you could give him. Clara thought about that, about the papers she'd burned, about the secrets she'd carefully managed, and the truths she'd strategically revealed, about the empire transformed from feared to respected through honest work and fair dealing. Maybe, she said, or maybe we're just doing our best with what we inherited, trying to build something our children won't have to apologize for. You're pregnant. Ruth said it as fact, not question. Clara's hand went to her stomach instinctively. 3 months. How did you know? I've been watching women long enough to recognize the signs. Does Ethan know? Not yet. I wanted to be sure. Clara smiled. We're going to have a baby. A real cross heir. One who'll inherit something built on honest foundations instead of stolen land. That child will be lucky. To have parents who understand that legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's how you earned it in the first place. Ruth squeezed Clara's hand. Victor would have loved being a grandfather. even if he would have been terrible at it. They stood in comfortable silence watching the ranch work. Clara thought about the future, the child growing inside her, the empire she and Ethan were building together, the legacy they'd pass down. It wasn't perfect. Nothing built by human hands ever was. But it was honest, hard-earned, something worth fighting for. 3 years after arriving at the Cross Ranch as an invisible daughter sold by a desperate father, Clara Cross stood as co-leader of an empire transformed, not through violence or intimidation, but through patience, honesty, and the courage to face ugly truths and make them right. She'd been chosen because she looked like she could survive, but she'd proven she could do more than survive. She could build, transform, create something better than what came before. The sun climbed higher, painting the Montana landscape in shades of gold. Cattle grazed on land now honestly held. Ranch hands worked for fair wages under reasonable conditions. Neighboring ranches cooperated instead of competed. The whole territory was healing from decades of Victor Cross's scorched earth empire building. And at the center of it all stood Clara, tall, strong, scarred, and absolutely unbreakable. The woman nobody chose. The daughter nobody wanted. The bride selected for her capacity to endure. She'd endured. But more than that, she'd conquered. Not through violence or cruelty, but through the quiet strength of persistence and the radical courage of honesty. Clara Cross, the name she'd earned, the legacy she was building, the future she was creating not just for herself but for the child growing inside her and all the generations that would follow. She wasn't the chosen daughter. She was the one who changed everything. And as the Montana sun climbed higher over the empire she'd helped transform, Clara smiled and placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the flutter of new life. A new beginning. A future built on foundations that would hold. The war was over. The empire was transformed. The legacy was secure. And Clara Cross, who'd started as nothing in everyone else's eyes, had become everything she needed to be. Not because anyone chose her, but because she chose herself. The story of the invisible daughter who became irreplaceable was complete, but the life she'd built was just beginning, and it would be honest, strong, and worth every sacrifice it took to create. In the harsh frontier where only the strong survived, Clara had proven something more important than strength. She'd proven that courage wasn't just endurance. It was the willingness to face ugly truths, make hard choices, and build something better than what came before. She'd rewritten the rules, changed the game, transformed an empire of blood and lies into something that could finally stand on honest ground. And as the day stretched before her full of work and possibility, and the future growing inside her, Clara Cross knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Home. Finally, truly home.